Chapter 767. At night, a gentle breeze blew in the Alabakian mountains. The small village that had been rebuilt was still lifeless. After all, a lot of people died in the last conflict. However, with the help of the American government, the houses here were quickly built. After all, it was basically made of wood, and it wasn't a tall building. It took the construction team 3 days to come in, and they used the local materials to build the house in 2 days. When they left, they even reinforced the walls to prevent people from coming over to cause trouble. They also specially installed a solar-powered satellite phone. Jianghai was not here all the time. It can be said that the government only left when everything was almost done. However, although they had a new house to live in, and the people who attacked here were wanted, the faces of the people in this tribe were still very gloomy. The men were thinking that they were too cowardly. They didn't even have a chance to fight back when the other party came knocking on their door. Especially those who had the ability to compete for the title of the strongest warrior. In their eyes, they were really too shameful. So these days, they were a little unhappy and angry at themselves. At the same time, they also stepped up their training. After Turok's brother Patton got Jianghai's August, Jianghai didn't take it back. It's just a gun. After he goes back, he will get a better one. With this gun, Jianghai will leave it to him. With this gun, he will become the leader of these young people. On the other hand, some of the old and weak women were worried about another thing. They didn't ask for revenge or anything. They just wanted to be safe. They were wondering if the tribe was still safe. Maybe in a few days, someone will come to attack the tribe. When they thought of this, they lost their spirit. Looking at the lifeless atmosphere of the entire tribe, not only the patriarch, but also Turok felt a little uncomfortable. However, as a member of the tribe and a woman, she really didn't have any right to speak. But today after dinner, the chief of the tribe called her to his room. Don't think too much. The old man didn't have any bad intentions. After calling her into the room, the two of them sat far away from each other. This time, I called you here, do you know why? The patriarch looked at Turok for a long time, then slowly said, I don't know. Turok shook her head. She really didn't know why she was called here. This matter, maybe only you can do it. I want to send something to Jianghai. Looking at Turok's doubtful eyes, the old man didn't care. After a chuckle, he slowly said to her. Hearing the old man mention Jianghai, Turok's eyes lit up. Women worship heroes. Of course, in the current world, women worship more heroes with money. But in this tribe, they still maintain the ancient civilization. Jianghai showed his power that night. But in the eyes of many women in the tribe, if Jianghai stayed here after that day, as long as he hooked his finger, there would be many women willing to accompany him. Turok was one of them. Moreover, she was the only one who had close contact with Jianghai. After all, they slept in the same room that night, although one was on the bed and the other was on the floor. Remember, you must definitely pass this thing to Jianghai. Then, you must listen to Jianghai's arrangements. Seeing that Turok was a little distracted, the patriarch whispered and called her soul back. Then, he took out an envelope from his pocket. This envelope was specially taken from the police station before he left. Otherwise, this thing would be very precious in the mountains. After passing the envelope to Turok, the patriarch said seriously, Okay, I understand. Hearing the patriarch's words, Turok also said seriously. The next morning, Turok took her luggage and left the tribe. Only 2 people knew that she was leaving. One was the patriarch, the other was her brother Patton. After Patton knew that she was going to look for Jianghai, he didn't say anything. He just gave her a talisman from when he was young and asked her to bring it to Jianghai. Turok left. But no one knew how long she would be gone. After all, it took Jianghai 2 days to drive in a straight line. She was now walking from the tribe to Winthrop, which wasn't an easy thing to do. At this time, Jianghai also encountered something that wasn't very easy. At least in his opinion, this was the case. These bastards, they are serious. Edward Anderson looked at the things displayed on the radar and said to Jianghai in a deep voice. Jianghai was also standing in the small house at the dock, frowning as he looked at the red dots in front of him. Each red dot represented a ship. His fish farm was invaded. The incident started 3 days ago. Everyone knew that there were fish in Jianghai's manor. The fish in Jianghai's manor were very valuable. This was something that everyone in Boston knew very well. Money moved people's hearts. It was such a simple question. Jianghai had a lot of influence in the upper echelons of Massachusetts, and he also had influence in Winthrop. Therefore, whether it was high-ranking politicians or residents of Winthrop, they didn't dare to provoke Jianghai. But Boston was so large that the fishermen of Revere, Chelsea, Avery, Somerville, Cambridge, Watertown, Newton, Brooklyn, Needham, Canton, Milton, Dedham, and Quincy did not object to it, though the fishermen of Revere, Chelsea, Avery, Somerville, Cambridge, Watertown, Newton, Brooklyn, Needham, Canton, Milton, Dedham, Quincy did, especially after Jianghai expanded his fish farm again. In their view, Jianghai's fish farm was very big, and there were fish in it. In their view, not all property was sacred and couldn't be violated, especially when it came to fish. Huaxia's textbooks taught them that Americans had a robber's spirit in their bones. However, after Jianghai came here, he found that this sentence was actually not so true. Not only did Americans have a robber's spirit in their bones, but in fact, everyone had it. Therefore, some people thought about stealing fish. However, it was not possible during the day. Marlin Rupert and Bell Lester's helicopters would always patrol the fish farm. If there was a problem, they would directly fly over. They didn't have to do anything. They just had to remember the ship number and report it to the Coast Guard. Now that the Coast Guard's salary was completely dependent on Jianghai, they naturally wouldn't let go of these ships easily. Fines from the higher-ups were inevitable. Therefore, it could be said that the losses outweighed the gains. However, once people went astray, it was really difficult to come back. Those who were punished did not become chickens in the eyes of others. Instead, they were thinking of ways to steal fish without being discovered. Some people went at night, but it was very dangerous at night. It was easy to bump into Jianghai's fishing boats. At that time, they would naturally be in trouble. Therefore, some people were prepared to play dirty. They prepared to drive a small boat to steal fish at night. The boat was very small and would not be shown on the radar. Moreover, Jianghai's fish was very expensive. A few nets were enough for them to spend. This made many people think about it. In the end, the two Chelsea brothers were the first to carry out this plan. It was 3 days ago. These two men drove a small boat to Jianghai's waters and began to catch fish in the dark. The people did not discover them, but the fish did. Before they could catch a second fish, a big fool appeared and knocked their boat into the water. The people fell into the water and were naturally eaten. The next day, when Jianghai and his men were patrolling, they found the boat and nothing else. After reporting it to the Coast Guard said that the boat was knocked over by a big fish. The people should have been killed. This happened in Jianghai's waters. Jianghai could not get away with it. According to the original statement, Jianghai might have to pay about 100,000 yuan. After all, the two men died in his territory. Jianghai was very unwilling to pay more than 20,000 yuan. You came to my territory to steal fish and drowned, and you still want me to pay? Shameless bastard. However, the matter here was not settled yet. The people from the Fishery Association came over to make trouble. According to them, it was the fish that killed the brothers. The brothers were from the Fisheries Association, so they had to come here to punish the murderer. It was like a tiger eating a man in the park. Although the man deserved it, the tiger had to be beaten to death. But fish were different from people. Fish were in the sea. How could you determine which fish killed them? According to them, they were planning to capture all of the big fishes and kill them. Of course, this was what they said. In fact, they just wanted to catch fish. Who knew if they put the fish in the boat? And most importantly, even if Jianghai sent people to each boat to watch them, and not let them put the fish in the boat, after the fish were squeezed in the net, they would die on the boat. Even if they fell back into the sea, Jianghai would suffer a huge loss. The most important thing was that Jianghai was indeed a little guilty, because he had big fish. And these people came under the banner of not being punished by the law. Such a banner was the same everywhere. After 2 days of negotiation, Jianghai did not give up an inch of land. Today these people were going to fight. The densely packed fishing boats came directly to Jianghai's fishing ground. They planned to empty Jiang Hai's fishing ground in one go. Damn, Mayor Cartwright, don't you have anything to say? Looking at these fishing boats rushing over, Jiang Hai gritted his teeth and said to Tommy Charles beside him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Tommy Charles's eyes were shining with hatred. Mayor Cartwright went to ask. They said that this is a civil dispute. Before there is bloodshed, the police are not suitable to intervene. But the Constitution of the United States stipulates that everyone's property is sacred and inviolable. If you fight back, it is in accordance with the Constitution. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Tommy Charles said helplessly, there was really no way to say this. Damn, these damn politicians. Jiang Hai understood the words of these people as soon as he heard it. They mean that this is Jiang Hai's territory, so he can fight with them. If you fight with them, they will suffer in silence. They will not be counted as you taking the initiative to attack, so there will be no trouble. It looks good. But one must know that Jiang Hai's opponent was not one or two ships, but dozens of ships. On each of these boats, there are more than a dozen people. Adding together, there are hundreds of people. Will Jiang Hai believe that they don't bring weapons on board? If he fires at them, won't they shoot at him? Jiang Hai only has one helicopter. One helicopter against dozens of boats. It's really amazing that they can say that. It's really unreliable. We can only rely on ourselves. Hearing that there is no help from Mayor Cartwright, Edward Anderson can't help but sigh. Now they have no other way. Otherwise, they can only watch these people take advantage of them. Or they can only fight with these people. It's that simple. Damn it. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai said in a deep voice. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, the fishermen around him stood up. Cowboys and fishermen are not good-tempered. For them, this job in Jiang Hai's manner is excellent. They earn a lot, eat well, live well, and are not too busy. The most important thing is that they have a lot of hope. Now that someone has come to make trouble, they are not to be trifled with. With Jiang Hai's order, Belle Lester directly flew the helicopter over. Jiang Hai and the others immediately got on two fishing boats and rushed over. The two fishing boats were extremely fast. But when they arrived at the border, Jiang Hai found that he was still too late. He didn't block all of them outside. Now the leading fishing boats have already put down their nets, ready to catch the fish directly. Boss, what should we do? Seeing that these boats completely ignored Jiang Hai's boat and were ready to catch the fish, Edward Anderson's face was quite ugly. He walked to Jiang Hai's side and whispered to him, knock over these curs. Looking at these boats outside, Jiang Hai's eyes narrowed. After comparing the tonnage of the boats, he growled with a gloomy face. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Edward Anderson's eyes couldn't help but light up. He showed his big white teeth, then gave a thumbs up to Jiang Hai, then directly commanded the two fishing boats to crash into the fleet in front of them. These boats clearly didn't think that Jiang Hai would be so strong. Two against dozens, he actually dares to crash into the boats directly. Does he want to die? But no matter what they think, what they have to do now is to move immediately. Unfortunately, they still have nets, and Jiang Hai's boat is much faster and more powerful than them. They simply didn't give the fishing boats in front of them any chance. The engines of the two boats roared as they rushed towards the two boats closest to them. The shadows of the two boats grew bigger and bigger in the eyes of the crew members of the two boats. Chapter 768. When Jiang Hai bought the boat, he was afraid that the boat would not be sturdy in the sea. This could be seen when he looked back. Jiang Hai was greedy, lecherous, and afraid of death. Of course, his fear of death was actually at the forefront. There was no one who was not afraid of death, especially people like Jiang Hai. If he wanted money, he had money. If he wanted women, he had women. There was nothing to worry about. Although this kind of life was very unambitious, what was the point of pursuing a beautiful life here? Therefore, he did not care about being a salted fish. However, he was very clear about one thing. He had not had enough of this kind of life. Although he did not have such a life when he was building the boat 2 years ago, at least his life back then was quite good. He built his offshore fishing boat according to the standards of ocean-going fishing boats. The sturdiness, degree, and size were indeed far from what these fishermen's boats could compare to. With Jiang Hai's order, the two fishing boats collided with the boat in front of them that was preparing to collect the net. Clang! Clang! When the two boats collided, they almost instantly knocked the opposite boat back and directly lost control. The people on the other side did not expect that Jiang Hai would actually collide with them. He did not give them a chance at all. Immediately, a few fishermen were hit and fell into the sea. Fortunately, which sailor did not know how to swim. After falling into the sea, they swam far away in the blink of an eye. They were not prepared to face Jiang Hai's boat head-on in the water. On Jiang Hai's side, because they were the aggressors, they held on tightly. This collision caused a lot of shaking, but nothing happened. After stabilizing the boat, Jiang Hai and the others also looked at the other boats. Let's teach these guys a lesson. While they were checking the other boats, those fishing boats were also frightened. The small fishing boats that originally put down the net were trying hard to retrieve the fishing net at this time. They did not want to be like the other two boats. If they were hit like this, the owners of the other boats would probably be heartbroken. Many fishing boats that were close to the two boats also saw the miserable state of the two boats. A large part of the bow was caved in from the collision. Why did a ship have a bow? It was to look like one. This had a lot to do with dynamics. Now that there was such a large dent, there was no way to directly sail out to sea, because it would be very dangerous. No one could predict the outcome of such a huge wave. As for the money, they didn't know if Jiang Hai would give it to them. If Jiang Hai didn't give them any money, and they had to pay for the repairs themselves, they wouldn't be able to fix it without more than $10,000. That would be a month's work for nothing. If Jiang Hai knew what they were thinking, he would chuckle. They are really shameless. They invaded his waters, forcibly stole his fish, and now they want him to compensate them for repairing their ships. Although Jiang Hai has a lot of money, this money belongs to Jiang Hai. Why should he give it to others? In China, there were some people like this who specialized in moral kidnapping. They stood at the top and scolded people every day. If there was a natural disaster, they would scold those rich people and say that they should donate as much as they wanted. If they didn't donate, they would be letting their conscience down. They would be trash, scum, and sinners of the nation. In the beginning, Jiang Hai was just watching for fun. But now he had entered this level. At this time he had to say why should he? He was willing to donate as much as he wanted. If he didn't donate, it would still be his money. Why should others decide how to spend his money? Like now, perhaps some people will say that it's just some fish. Jiang Hai's beef makes a lot of money every year. Opening up some waters to these fishermen, everyone can earn money together. Isn't that a good thing? Some people would also say that Jiang Hai should go back to China and announce the use of spiritual energy. Then, Hua Xia would take off and become the new overlord of the world. But it was still the same question. Why should he? Every single cent of Jiang Hai's money belonged to Jiang Hai. How much he wanted to donate, and who he wanted to donate to was his freedom. He was willing to do so. These people wanted to impose their will on him. This was completely impossible. After coming to Winthrop, someone had done this once. It was when Winthrop was recruiting factories. At that time, Jiang Hai let the people of Winthrop know that he was not the people's servant. He was the people's boss. It was useless to talk about the interests of the masses with him, because he could flip the table and quit at any time. He didn't care what was on the table. If there was a hot pot, he would flip it over without hesitation. He was so hot-tempered. It was obvious that these people had not figured out Jiang Hai's pulse yet. Seeing these fishing boats scatter in panic, Jiang Hai couldn't help but sneer. Then he looked at the largest fishing boat. Hit that guy. Jiang Hai had seen this fishing boat before. He had seen it when he went to Boston to sell fish. Edward Anderson had told him that this fishing boat belonged to the president of Boston's Fishing Association. This time, he was the one who had started it. Jiang Hai wouldn't let him get away with it. Jiang Hai pointed his finger and gave the order to the two boats. After receiving Jiang Hai's order, the two boats quickly collided with the big boat that had not had time to completely retract the net. Seeing Jiang Hai and the others aggressively colliding with them, the sailors on the boat were honestly a little confused. Some people subconsciously wanted to run to the stern of the boat. On the uppermost deck, the president of the Fishing Association was standing there with his son. In fact, these people had been eyeing Jiang Hai's fish farm for a long time. But because Jiang Hai was a person who lived in seclusion, compared to ordinary rich people, they couldn't find any fault with him. In addition, Jiang Hai himself had not made any profit from this fish farm in the past 2 years. If they couldn't see the fish farm being sold for money, they could ignore Jiang Hai's fish farm. But this year, when it was sold for money, these people couldn't sit still. People in Huaxia would do whatever they saw was valuable. For example, when they saw that Jiang Hai was making money by raising fish, they would buy a piece of water and raise fish themselves to make money. But Americans were different. They didn't have the habit of raising fish. In their opinion, those who raised fish in a piece of land were all fools. Because fish were mobile, especially if the fish inside were valuable, it would be like touching their own cake. So for them, stealing fish was inevitable. But they didn't expect Jiang Hai to have such a good relationship with the Coast Guard. Stealing fish once could earn a few $1,000s, but when they went ashore, they would be fined 3 times the amount, and it would be rounded up. For example, if they stole Jiang Hai's fish, which was worth $10,100, they would be fined $11,000. The fine would be 3 times the amount, which was $33,000. Such a fine was too much for them to bear. That was why some people took the risk out of desperation. Finally, they got the chance. 2 guys died in Jiang Hai's fish farm. What else could they say? Hunting down the murderer. This was also the reason why they invaded Jiang Hai's fishing grounds. They themselves didn't believe this reason, but it was just a slogan, a fuse. After the police heard their reason, the police didn't appear. After all, people died. In a country like the United States, where human rights were high, people died. It was definitely the most important thing. It could easily escalate to the level of human rights. These people wanted Jiang Hai to hand over the murderer, but Jiang Hai refused, so they came to catch the murderer themselves. This was inevitable. Although this was a farce, the police couldn't get involved. But the police also gave Jiang Hai authorization. Like now, these fishermen would definitely be at a disadvantage. These sons of B******, I'll just kill them. Looking at the 2 fishing boats, the chairman's son on the fishing boat couldn't help but curse. Then, he picked up a double-barreled shotgun and prepared to shoot. But seeing his son's appearance, the chairman pressed his hand down. Guns are absolutely not allowed. Looking at his son, the chairman said calmly, "Why? In my opinion, this sea belongs to all of humanity. Anyone who wants to come and fish is fine. These fellows have taken over this sea, and even dared to crash into our ship. Hugging them to death is a light punishment." Hearing his father's words, his son couldn't help but roar furiously. Stopping people from making money is like killing their parents, especially when they learned that Jiang Hai's fish may be worth billions. This hatred is almost enough to kill their whole family, so it's no wonder this guy was so impulsive. Look at the person in the helicopter. That person retired from the Triangle State Army. He is now a cowboy and Jiang Hai's bodyguard here. Why didn't he move from the helicopter? That's because he was waiting for us to shoot first, then he can shoot. Are you going to compete with someone from the Triangle State to see who's better at shooting? Hearing his son's words, the chairman said very plainly, although he doesn't understand the Huaxia culture, he still understands the principle of knowing the enemy and knowing oneself. He knows that he can play rough with Jiang Hai in the rules, but he can't play dirty, because Jiang Hai's power is not something he can compare with. He is not stupid. He heard the news that those punks in B City attacked Jiang Hai's manor. So many people were killed by Jiang Hai. They are not professionals, so it's better for them not to come and make a fool of themselves. Therefore, before coming here, he clearly forbade Jiang Hai to fire first. Otherwise, they can't fire their weapons. If they shoot, then it's really easy to blow things up to the point of wiping out their reason. Damn it, then we just watch them hit us. Hearing his father's words, the man couldn't help but say angrily, "How is that possible?" Hearing his son's words, the chairman couldn't help but smile. As he waved his hand, several sailors pushed out 2 small cars in an instant. There was a belt on the small cars, a huge nozzle, and a slender pipe connected to the boat. Seeing this thing, many people on the fisherman's side couldn't help but brighten up. "Water cannon. Dad, great move." Seeing these 2 things, his son laughed for the first time. And then without saying a word, he went over and picked one first. Looking at Jiang Hai's two boats getting closer and closer, he also smiled evilly and pointed the nozzle at them. Start. With the chairman's order, the two nozzles were turned on at the first time, and then a huge stream of water gushed out from these two nozzles in an instant. When looking at these two water jets, Jiang Hai was also shocked. High-pressure water gun? No, it's a high-pressure water cannon. Looking at the water jets rushing over like a water dragon, Jiang Hai couldn't help but say with a dumbfounded expression. But hearing his words, Edward Anderson narrowed his eyes and said helplessly. At the same time, his hand was also quickly turning the steering wheel, preparing to avoid the impact of the water gun. But unfortunately, this was impossible. Pung pung. Two sounds were heard as two streams of water rushed towards the bow of Jiang Hai's ship. The huge impact force, although it was not like the collision of two boats, will not break the bow, but the huge impact force still made the bow a little bit off course. The original course of the collision with the big boat changed in an instant. It was impossible to force it back, because the closer it was, the greater the power of the water jets. As if there was a giant holding a stick and forcibly pushing Jiang Hai's boat away. Seeing this situation, Edward Anderson directly turned the steering wheel and drove half a circle to the back. Marin Rupert, who was driving the boat on the other side, did the same. They knew that with these two high-pressure water cannons, they couldn't do anything. Haha, who told you to be arrogant? Come and hit us. UF** King Huaxia. This is the United States, not a place where you can be arrogant. We will take over your territory. Seeing Jiang Hai in front of him driving half a circle to the back, the son who turned off the valve only after the water cannons couldn't hit Jiang Hai couldn't help but stand on the bow and shout loudly. Hearing his shout, the small fishing boats on the other side also laughed. Hearing their laughter, Jiang Hai's complexion became quite bad. He had seen this thing on TV before. Many countries would use this weapon to protect disputed territorial waters. Not only would it not hurt people, it was also very deterrent, and it was not strong enough to cause friction. But Jiang Hai didn't expect that these guys would use this thing to deal with him. Damn it, damn it, damn it, I want to get this thing too, kill them. Looking at the two high-pressure water cannons in front of him, Jiang Hai's face was as ugly as it could be. It was the first time he was bullied like this in front of his home. Shameless. Dalton Green of the Ocean Temple should have this thing. I can't take this lying down. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Edward Anderson took a deep breath. To be honest, it wasn't easy to make this old man so angry. However, these guys had succeeded in arousing Edward Anderson's hatred. Looking at the flaunting fishing boats in front of them, their faces were quite ugly. After seeing Jiang Hai's ship being repelled, Edward Anderson's face turned ugly. Those greedy fishing boats still wanted to catch fish, but at this time, two Coast Guard helicopters came from nowhere. Chapter 769. Jiang Hai, we will give you 3 more days to think about it. If you don't hand over the murderer, then we will catch him ourselves. Seeing the Coast Guard coming, these fishermen also knew that today may be the end of the day. The president over there came over, and after speaking through the radio, he waved his hand and left with his fishing boats one after another. Looking at the backs of these boats leaving, Jiang Hai was really angry. He hasn't been angered like this for a long time. Boss, what should we do now? Under the Coast Guard's policy of smoothing things over, today's matter was finally left unsettled. But it was obvious that the other party had finally found an opportunity to invade Jiang Hai's fishing grounds. They would not let Jiang Hai off so easily. But how to deal with these people? Jiang Hai does have some headaches. These people can't be beaten, and it is impossible to play dirty. But this stubbornness, when would it end? When he thought of this, Jiang Hai felt a headache. What should I do, fight? After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai gritted his teeth. Since it is now impossible to stop halfway, then he has nothing to say, just one word, fight. He has never been a good person, so now that others are bullying him, there is absolutely no reason for him to be afraid. Uncle Ai Hua, didn't you just say that there are water cannons in the Sea Temple? But if they wanted to do it, they had to have weapons. It was impossible to directly take out a gun. But as the man said, before the other party opened fire, They absolutely could not open fire. Whoever opened fire first would be the one to blame. This point, whether it was the mayor or the police, they had already told Jiang Hai. If they can't shoot, then the choice of weapons is much less. Jiang Hai thought about it and decided to use water cannons. No problem, let's go in the afternoon. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Edward Anderson said loudly. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai temporarily calmed down his anger. Everything will wait until we go to the Sea Temple in the afternoon. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but rub his temples. Troublesome. How troublesome. Jiang Hai hated trouble the most. After driving the boat back to the dock, Jiang Hai and the others were not idle at noon. After discussing together, they had lunch. In the afternoon, Jiang Hai and Edward Anderson drove directly to the Boston dock. When they arrived at the Ocean Temple, it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and the workers had just finished their lunch break. Therefore, the inside of the factory was a bit messy. But after Jiang Hai and the others walked in, Jiang Hai saw Dalton Green wearing a helmet. He was the boss of the Ocean Temple. At this time, he was directing the workers to install a ship. Hey Dalton! Looking at Dalton Green, Edward Anderson couldn't help but shout. Hearing Edward Anderson's words, Dalton Green also turned his head and glanced at him. There was a hint of surprise in his eyes at first. Then he smiled as if he knew that Jiang Hai and the others were coming. He walked over with a smile. Hey man, I knew you were almost here. Looking at Edward Anderson, Dalton Green shook hands with Jiang Hai first, because he knew that he was the one who spent the money. Then he said to Edward Anderson, I think you should know about it. After all, this matter is now spreading everywhere. Hearing his words, Edward Anderson smiled and said somewhat speechlessly. Although they didn't say it explicitly, Jiang Hai knew what they were talking about. The conflict between him and the fishermen was actually not a secret in Boston. After all, the fishermen had to portray themselves as righteous, otherwise, they would have no reason to attack. So these guys had been creating a lot of momentum in Boston these days. Dalton Green naturally knew that these people were looking for trouble. When the time comes, whether Jiang Hai wants to get weapons or ships, his place is the best choice. So he was not surprised by Jiang Hai's arrival. I really can't hide anything from you. The number of those guys is too large, and they even got high-pressure water cannons. We suffered a lot today. This time I asked you to come here mainly to buy some high-pressure water cannons, and then beat them back. Hearing Dalton Green's words, Edward Anderson nodded with a wry smile, and then said with a face full of hatred, These guys are like a pack of wolves. If you show a little weakness in front of them, they will skin you, break your bones, and swallow you whole. Therefore, whether it is Jiang Hai or Edward Anderson, they are determined to protect the fishery. Now they came to Dalton Green to look for weapons. Come with me. Hearing Edward Anderson's words, Dalton Green smiled, and then took them to the depths of the factory. Turning around, they went to the harbor where the factory was preparing to launch the ships. It was a huge and empty place. After coming here, Jiang Hai looked at Dalton Green with some doubts. What are we doing here? Are there water cannons here? Looking at the empty place, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. Ho ho, Mr. Jiang. I know at first sight that you have not bought any weapons. When you buy weapons, you should try them first to see if they are useful, right? This is the test site. Come on, bring them here. After speaking to the people around him, a lot of workers came over with a lot of things. The first thing that Jiang Hai saw was a high-pressure water cannon about the same size as the one used by the fire brigade. Under Dalton Green's signal, the workers opened the valve in an instant, and a water dragon sprayed out from the water cannon. It sprayed for about 20 meters before gradually falling down, drawing a rainbow in the sky. This is the most basic high-pressure direct current water cannon. Its serial number is QZ355, and its caliber is 50 millimeters. It can spray 5 liters of water per second, and its range is at least 25 meters. Generally, firefighters use this kind of water cannon. When suppressing riots in prison, they also use it. It's good quality, but it's not good for ships. Its advantage is that it's light and simple. Although it's not good for ships, it's not a problem for people. You can directly spray the people on the plate armor into the sea with this water cannon. Looking at the water, Dalton Green said with a smile. When Jiang Hai first saw such a thin pipe, he actually didn't take it seriously. But after hearing Dalton Green's words, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Yes, this thing can't hit ships, but it can hit people. Thinking of the people standing on the deck of the ship today, Zhang Tai thought. Jiang Hai touched his chin. Maybe it's a good idea. I can hit people while shooting water cannons. It's a good choice. Most importantly, this thing can't hit big ships, but it seems to be good for small ships. This is a larger size than the previous one. It's 7.5 millimeters, with a diameter of 65 millimeters. It can spray 28 meters away, and the water output is 7.5 L. It's a bit weak for ordinary people to hold, so we need several people to hold it. Soon after Dalton Green finished his words, another group of people walked over with a water gun. However, this one was obviously bigger than the previous one. After spraying out the water, it looked more powerful than the previous one. If it could hit people, TSK. No, is there a bigger one? The one they used to hit our ship today was at least 80 millimeters. When Jiang Hai expressed his interest in this weapon, Edward Anderson shook his head and said to Dalton Green, 80 millimeters? There's an 80 millimeters model, but there's an 82 millimeters model. Take a look. Hearing Edward Anderson's words, Dalton Green waved his hand again, and several workers came up with something like a small cart. At the sight of this thing, Jiang Hai knew that it was the water cannon used by those people today. It's this model. This thing can knock our ship askew. Looking at this water cannon, Jiang Hai spoke first. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Dalton Green couldn't help but smile. It seems that they came prepared. Your two ships are built according to the specifications of going out to sea. Only this kind of water cannon can affect your ship. The previous two can at most make you feel a little uncomfortable. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Dalton Green said with a smile. Is there anything more powerful? I want to let them know the consequences of messing with me. Hearing Dalton Green's words, Jiang Hai also changed his expression, and then said seriously. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Dalton Green's eyes lit up. Your needs are the meaning of our existence. If you're interested, you can take a look at this. This should be the largest water cannon on the market. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Dalton Green said with a smile, and then motioned his workers to push that thing out. As another small cart appeared, Jiang Hai's eyes lit up. This was because the water cannon that appeared in front of him was much larger than the previous one. I won't give you any empty words. There are 100 millimeters above 82 millimeters. This is 120 millimeters, you can try it. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Dalton Green said with a smile. Following his order, his workers also opened the water valve, and in an instant, a water dragon rushed out of the valve. What a joke! Jiang Hai looked at the water dragon, and saw that it was about 60 meters away. The water dragon was very thick and strong. Looking at the water dragon, Jiang Hai's eyes couldn't help but shine. This was exactly what he wanted. I want this. Order 4 for me. He waved his hand and directly ordered 4 water cannons without asking for the price. But fortunately, Edward Anderson stopped him first and shook his head at him. He still had to ask first before making a decision. Dalton, we're old friends. Can this thing be used on the ship? It should be known that such a high-pressure water cannon has a great impact in recoil. It also depends on the ship. He didn't want his fishing boat to be damaged. No problem. Don't talk about 4 water cannons on your fishing boat. Even 10 water cannons won't be a problem. But you can't just install 1 water cannon on one side. If you install 2 water cannons on each side, there won't be a problem. You can install them anywhere. Hearing Edward Anderson's words, Dalton Green on the other side couldn't help but laugh and say, also, if this water cannons shoot out, won't it directly capsize the other party's boat? You know, I don't want to get involved in a murder lawsuit. If the boat sinks or capsizes in the sea, the people on the boat are almost dead. Why is that? Because when the boat sinks or capsizes, the air in the cabin will be expelled by the seawater, and a large amount of seawater will pour in, forming a whirlpool. After all, people's swimming speed is not fast. Once they are entangled by the whirlpool, they will be directly pulled into the sea. How long can a person not breathe? Therefore, if they are pulled into the sea, they will be dead. The conflict between Jiang Hai and the others here is a conflict, but Edward Anderson knows very well that there must be no more deaths. Of course, if they go to Jiang Hai's territory to commit suicide, it won't count. But if there are more deaths in such a conflict, it will be troublesome. 120 water cannons can deal with medium-sized fishing boats and above, but small fishing boats can't. They will be easily overturned. But you can install 82 water cannons, 75 water cannons, 65 water cannons, or even 50 water cannons. These are enough to deal with those small fishing boats. Hearing Edward Anderson's words, Dalton Green didn't lie. He also knows that he is the one who sold these water cannons. If there really is a murder case, he can't escape responsibility. So now he is telling the truth. Hearing his words, Edward Anderson looked at Jiang Hai. It's up to him to decide. 4 water cannons, 4 water cannons, and 4 water cannons. I want them now. Jiang Hai doesn't want to get involved in a murder case, so after thinking for a while, he said to Dalton Green in front of him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Dalton Green also smiled. This time the business is done. He immediately ordered his workers to take these water cannons from the warehouse for Jiang Hai. Seeing that Jiang Hai has made up his mind, Edward Anderson didn't say anything. He just checked the water cannons one by one. After confirming that there is no problem with them, Jiang Hai paid the money without hesitation. The price of these water cannons is not cheap, especially the 4 water cannons of 120 water cannons. The total price is comparable to the price of a fishing boat of Jiang Hai's level. But Jiang Hai doesn't feel distressed at all. First, because he doesn't lack money. Second, because he is counting on these water cannons to take revenge. Chapter 770. Boss is back. Did you get the things back? Looking at Jiang Hai and Edward Anderson who drove back, Tommy Charles and others who were still at the dock ran out. Because of the fishermen's trouble these days, Jiang Hai and the others didn't go fishing at night. Of course, before that, they made a lot of fishing, at least to ensure that the cooperative restaurants and Sam's Club in Prawalton had something to sell. But there was not so much variety. So, including Edward Anderson and the others, these people didn't go fishing at night. If they don't fish, there is no income. Although the salary is still as usual, what they really want is the bonus. Got it back, let's do it together. Hearing Tommy Charles's words, Jiang Hai also nodded. Hearing his words, Tommy Charles and the others ran over and looked at the high-pressure water cannons behind Jiang Hai's car. Their faces showed a grim look. The fisherman's character is not very good. These guys dare to provoke them, so they will certainly not let these guys have a good time. But after taking down these water cannons, they found that there were some steel plates under the water cannons, and they looked very thick, not even inferior to the ones used on the boat. These things are. Seeing these steel plates, Eleanor Cece asked with some doubts. He really didn't know. These are used for defense. Thanks to Edward Anderson's reminder, if we want to fire outside, the best way is to set up an armed turret outside. Hearing these people's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh, then looked at Edward Anderson and recalled the request he made when Jiang Hai was about to pay. Hey, that's better, come on, let's arm these 2 fishing boats. Looking at these steel plates, Bill Zaphonia, who had just arrived, laughed first, then shouted loudly. Hearing his words, everyone also shouted loudly. Then everyone went to the dock and took a blowtorch, saw blades, and a series of other things. They began to concentrate on transforming their boat. Jiang Hai was not very clear about this, but fortunately, these people were familiar with it. They knew how to increase their defense, so that they wouldn't be hit by their opponents when they attacked. In addition, they didn't have to limit their vision. That night, the lights on the pier were only extinguished after 10 p.m. Jiang Hai dragged his tired body back home slowly. When he walked into the villa, he saw that the girls had specially saved dinner for him. He smiled. Although the girls hadn't said anything these days, Jiang Hai felt that they were still quite worried about him. However, some things couldn't be resolved just by taking a step back. At least, Jiang Hai didn't think so. After heating up the dishes, Jiang Hai ate a little and threw the remaining bowls and chopsticks into the dishwasher. Then he returned to his room. When he walked into his room, he found that Qi Jia, Chiya, Shira, and Ashilia, who were in charge of taking care of him tonight, were already asleep on the bed. Jianghai tiptoed into the bathroom and took a simple shower. The weather outside was very hot today. Coupled with the sea breeze, the sun, and the heat from the blowtorch, Jianghai had sweated a lot. When the wind dried his sweat, Jianghai himself felt that there was a strange smell on his body. So he more or less had to take a shower. Jianghai turned on the tap and began to wash. However, when he was about to apply shampoo to his hair, he suddenly saw Qi Jie standing in front of the bathroom door. "Hey, why are you up? Did I wake you up?" Looking at Qi Jie, who was standing there naked with the silk pajamas on her coat, Jianghai asked embarrassedly. "No, I wasn't asleep. As soon as you came back, I heard your voice." Qi Jie shook her head and looked at Jianghai and said indifferently. Hearing her words, Jianghai also smiled helplessly. He quickly applied the shower gel and then took a shower. In fact, he really wanted to apologize to Qi Jie. It was indeed his fault for making her so worried. Qi Jie sighed and whispered to Jianghai, "When men do things outside, women shouldn't talk too much. But you also know how important your position in this Zhuangxian is. So, I'll have to trouble you to consider the women around you before making any decisions." Hearing Jianghai stop talking, Qi Jie sighed and whispered to Jianghai, "I really made you worry." Hearing this, Jianghai also felt warm in his heart. He quickly washed off the foam on his body and head. Jianghai wiped his hair and walked in front of Qi Jie. "You know that you will make us worry, so you should pay more attention, okay?" Looking at Jianghai, Qi Jie looked at him with some reproach. Then she was about to turn around and leave, but the moment she turned around, Jianghai pulled her body back. Under her surprised gaze, Jianghai lowered his head and kissed her deeply on the lips. Feeling Jianghai's movements, Qi Jie almost instantly became soft. What she couldn't stand the most was Jianghai's overbearingness. Feeling the person in his arms instantly become as soft as a puddle of mud, Jianghai carried her out of the bathroom. But the remaining consciousness made Qi Jie press the bathroom door that Jianghai was about to open. Don't disturb them." Hearing Qi Jie's words, Jianghai froze for a moment, then nodded his head and launched an attack. In response to Jianghai's attack, Qi Jie snorted and began to fight back. War is so inexplicable, it's that simple. After an hour, the war ended. Jianghai also returned to the bed with Qi Jie, who had been washed again. After lying on the bed, Qi Jie turned around and went to sleep with Sheila beside her. She knew that Jianghai had the habit of hugging Qi to sleep, so she didn't care about it. Looking at Qi Jie's movements, Jianghai was somewhat embarrassed, but he was indeed used to hugging Qi, so he turned his head and hugged Qi to sleep. The night was silent. After waking up the next morning, Jianghai left again. Anyway, he had nothing to do. Naturally, he also had to help with the installation of the turrets. Although he was only going to be an assistant, after all, welding things also required skill and skill. In the United States, most of the owners of manors, ranches, and fish farms were very good at these things. This was because it was troublesome and expensive to ask for manual service in the United States. Instead of paying those people, they would rather do their own research. So from a young age, they spent their time repairing and maintaining things. When they grew up, they had accumulated enough experience. Although they couldn't be compared with those professionals, if they didn't care about the aesthetics and only cared about the quality, it was not a problem. Just like now, on the second night, several turrets had been welded. These turrets were square grids, and the size of the grids were different. Of course, the strength of the water guns was also different. Jianghai made his boat into a water hedgehog. Two 120mm cannons were placed at the bow, two 82mm cannons were placed on both sides of the boat, and the last two 65mm cannons were not welded, so they could be fired at any time. The 8 frames welded on the 2 boats could be said to be extremely sturdy. Although it was ugly and there were welded spots everywhere, it was quite sturdy. Jianghai and the others had done tests. Not to mention the 82mm cannons. Even the 120mm cannons couldn't leave any marks on the iron plate. The only thing that could be done was that the boat would be knocked back and forth, that was all. In this regard, Jiang Hai was quite satisfied. There were a total of 4 openings for the two 120mm water cannons. 3 of them were inlaid with bulletproof glass, which was used to observe the opposite side. There was a long oval water outlet about 30 centimeters long at the muzzle, which was used to investigate the angle. After testing, it could be fired to a position of about 45 degrees, which was enough. When the 2 water cannons opened at the same time, it would not give the other side any chance, and there were no blind spots. Jiang Hai had tried the power of the water cannons. Wooden boats were directly smashed into pieces, and sawdust flew everywhere. Ordinary small boats and small fishing boats would be overturned immediately. Only medium-sized fishing boats could withstand it, but they would also be shaken badly. It was like encountering a storm on the sea, which was quite terrifying. The 82mm cannons were like encountering a storm when dealing with ordinary small fishing boats. For such an effect, Jiang Hai was quite happy. Now it was time to see if the other side would come. If they didn't come, Jiang Hai and the others would just treat it as a game. If they came, Jiang Hai would teach them how to behave. Jiang Hai had never been afraid of anyone when it came to playing rough. But would they not come? Don't joke. People die for money, and birds die for food. It was that simple. On the 3rd day, after the water cannons were installed and adjusted, Jiang Hai and the others went to bed very early on the 3rd night. Jiang Hai also did not fool around with his girlfriend. Sure enough, at 5 o'clock the next morning, when the sky was just beginning to darken, Edward Anderson sounded the alarm. Then, Jiang Hai and the fishermen rushed to the dock immediately. Bell also immediately went to the helipad and started the helicopter. The purpose of the helicopter was not to fight, but to film. Jiang Hai could be considered to have taken the initiative this time. If these guys were desperate, then don't blame Jiang Hai for not being polite. After the 2 fishing boats were full of people, they directly drove to the place where the alarm sounded. This time, their speed was very fast. When they arrived at the border, those people had not yet entered Jiang Hai's territory. Jiang Hai fixed his eyes and could not help but curse. Maybe it was because he saw Jiang Hai's fishing boats suffer from the water cannons 3 days ago. So 3 days later, nearly 2/3 of the fishing boats were equipped with water cannons. They were not even hiding them. They were directly placed on the deck. Through the binoculars, Jiang Hai could not help but sneer at those people's proud expressions. It could be seen that they did not come with good intentions, but Jiang Hai and the others did not come with good intentions either. At this time, many people on those boats also saw the cannons on Jiang Hai's boat. For a moment, many people felt a little guilty because they did not know what was in those cannons. Who cares what they are? Just go straight to them. If Jiang Hai does not let us go, then drag his boat back to his dock. The boat of the Chamber of Commerce also saw Jiang Hai's cannons. The son of the Chamber of Commerce, who had a bad temper, said loudly to the people on the boat through the radio. Hearing that there was someone backing them, the hearts of these fishermen gradually relaxed. Jiang Hai, have you thought it through? Will you hand over the murderer or not? Seeing that the fishermen's minds gradually made up, the president of the Fishing Association couldn't help but chuckle, then shouted at Jiang Hai through the radio. I'll hand you over. I'm warning you now. You have entered my private waters. Now all of you withdraw immediately, and I will pretend that nothing happened. Otherwise, I will start to protect my rights and interests. Hearing the president's words, Jiang Hai directly scolded back, and then said loudly. Hearing that Jiang Hai still dared to be so tough, the president's face was quite ugly. It's really like the old saying of the Huaxia people. You won't cry until you see the coffin. You won't give up until you reach the Yellow River. Well, I'll see how you defend it, water cannon. Putting down the radio, he also knew that it was useless to say more, so he directly fired the cannons. With his order, countless water beams shot towards Jiang Hai's boat in an instant, but because they were still a little far away, these boats couldn't reach Jiang Hai's boat directly. But as the boats on both sides got closer and closer, it was only a matter of time before they reached it. 1682, 2365, and 1750. Looking at the thickness of these water beams, Edward Anderson reported the data to him. These guys still dare to use 82? That's really giving them face. Tell Marin to destroy the biggest boat, and we'll sweep the boats with 82 millimeters. Originally, Jiang Hai was thinking that he shouldn't be too ruthless in dealing with these ordinary boats. However, these people didn't think the same way. Now that these people wanted to kill Jiang Hai, how could Jiang Hai let them do as they pleased? With Jiang Hai's order, Edward Anderson immediately notified Marin Rupert. After Marin Rupert received the signal, he told Bill Havnia and Eleanor Cece on his boat, and the two immediately ran out of the cabin, came to the 120mm cannon, and aimed at the biggest boat on the opposite side. With Jiang Hai's order, the two also opened the valve in an instant. Boom! Two water dragons rushed towards the big boat over there, with an indomitable momentum. The crew on the deck of the boat was stunned at this time. What's going on? F***CK. Looking at the two water dragons rushing in front of him, the crew on the big boat over here couldn't help but be stunned. But before he finished speaking, the two water dragons had already rushed to his boat in an instant. Although the boat of the president of the Fisheries Association was not small, compared to Jiang Hai's boat, it was only one size smaller. But small was small. With a 120mm cannon rushing over, it would be strange if he wasn't stunned. And most importantly, his boat had no protective equipment. In an instant, the two water dragons rushed to the deck. The sailors over there didn't think that Jiang Hai's water dragons would rush up directly. The huge impact of the water jets rushed on these people, and the huge impact instantly washed them away. The impact force could directly break the wooden planks. Although it wasn't fatal in an instant, it was inevitable that they would be sent flying. The first unlucky one was the crew's son. He was directly sent flying backward and hit the wall over there. Fortunately, Marin Rupert didn't know who he was, so he didn't intend to kill him directly. After sending him flying, he began to charge at others. At the same time, he was also charging at the boat. In an instant, the boat was in a mess. The sailors on the deck were rolling and crawling in all directions. As for fighting back, they didn't even think about it. Of course, even if someone wanted to fight back, they would need to be able to touch Jiang Hai. The ship itself was no longer obedient. It was being washed by the current, and was somewhat out of control. Seeing Jiang Hai firing and killing their leader in an instant, many fishermen were a little flustered. Especially those guys who just came here to fish. Their boat didn't have any water cannons, and had no attack power. Now that they saw Jiang Hai's strength, they were also a little scared. Many boats slowed down their speed, ready to wait and see. But there were always some people who liked to take themselves too seriously. Seeing that the leading boat had lost its fighting power, some boats didn't retreat but rushed towards Jiang Hai, shouting slogans. Jiang Hai also walked out of the deck at this time, and went to a 120mm cannon. Looking at these fishing boats rushing over, Jiang Hai couldn't help but grin. After Jiang Hai adjusted his position, he also roared and instantly opened the valve of the high-pressure water cannon. In an instant, a water dragon directly spewed out. The fishing boat that was still shouting slogans didn't have time to react at all. The water dragon had already rushed over. 120 against 82. What else was there to say? The water dragon instantly rushed straight to the deck of the boat. Not only did it instantly send the sailors flying, but it also sent them flying at least 3 meters away. It also sent the 82mm cannon into the sea. Jiang Hai knew that although the real expensive part of this game was the pump motor, the platform above it wasn't cheap either. It would cost at least $10,000. These guys fishing for a month might not even earn $10,000. Jiang Hai now made them feel the pain. Their 82mm cannon was instantly sent flying. Their sailors were also instantly sent flying. And most importantly, the huge water dragon was constantly attacking the fishing boat. It must be known that this boat wasn't as big as the chairman's boat. It was just an ordinary small fishing boat near the sea. When the water dragon rushed forward, the boat was no longer moving to the side. Instead, it was moving backward. The water current was pushing it backward. The boat shook especially hard, as if it would flip over at any time. The people on the boat were completely panicked. Screams and curses were constantly heard. Seeing that these guys were almost scared out of their wits, Jiang Hai also turned the water cannon in another direction. After all, he didn't really want to send this boat of people into the sea to feed the sharks. So he was still very careful. Seeing that they were almost scared out of their wits, he directly changed direction. On the other side, the one who was controlling the water cannon was Zanderkian Christian. This guy was even more cowardly. He rushed the 82mm cannon into the sea. After scattering the sailors, he changed his target. What should we do? What should we do now? Seeing that Jiang Hai had dealt with 3 ships in an instant, many fishing boats stopped in their tracks. They were a little scared, although it was said that barefooted people were not afraid of wearing shoes. But for a pair of shoes, it was impossible for them to pay with their lives. Therefore, they were very conflicted and also very scared. I'll kill them all. These fishing boats didn't dare to move. On the other side, the chairman's fishing boat was also in a mess. The chairman's son looked like he was fished out of the water. After he climbed into the cabin, he took a long time to recover. The 120mm water cannon directly hit him. To be honest, the impact was really too big. At this time, there was an obvious bruise on his chest. It was estimated that he would be in pain for a while after he went back. When did he suffer such grievances? He immediately shouted loudly and directly picked up his shotgun. He was about to go out and fight with Jiang Hai. But before he could go out, he was stopped by his father. What I said to you, didn't you think about it? Did you forget that these people also have guns in their hands? Looking at his son in front of him, the chairman narrowed his eyes and said sternly to him. Hearing his father's words, the son was also a little confused. Then, what should we do now? Looking at his father, to be honest, he was quite unwilling. We have a lot of boats. I don't believe that he dares to directly overturn these boats. Tell the other boats to surround their boats. After thinking for a while, the chairman said loudly. Hearing the chairman's words, the captain immediately used the radio to tell the other fishing boats the news. After hearing this news, most of the people on the other fishing boats were very obedient and didn't move. After all, they were all old sailors. They knew that if the boat overturned, the people on the boat would die. Regardless of whether Jiang Hai will compensate them after they die, at least they will be the ones to die. The Americans especially value their lives. When the United States was at war, surrendering was actually not a difficult thing for them to accept. They were afraid of death on the surface, but now their lives depended on whether Jiang Hai, a rich man, would have a conscience or not. They were very afraid, so most of the fishing boats were still in a wait-and-see attitude. However, not all fishing boats were in a wait-and-see attitude. At least some fishing boats were ready to come over. Wealth comes from danger, this was their way. Looking at the boats coming over, Jiang Hai and the others in the boat looked at each other. Then they couldn't help but chuckle. Did these guys really think that they only had 2 water cannons? Shoot their water cannons into the sea, then let them come over. Mainly attack the big boat. Seeing the situation in front of them, Edward Anderson immediately ordered. After hearing his words, Jiang Hai and the others opened the water valve again and swept the water cannons towards the fishing boats. Unfortunately, their attacks were blocked by the steel plates. The threat to Jiang Hai and the others was almost zero. Only the splashed water fell from the holes in the roof, soaking them in water. But compared to Jiang Hai's water cannons, this water was far worse. One by one, the water cannons on the fishing boats were swept into the water by Jiang Hai and the others. One by one, the sailors fell into the sea or hid in the cabin. But these fishing boats were really tenacious. In such a situation, they still came over. They were prepared to use their advantage in numbers to squeeze Jiang Hai's fishing boats here, making them unable to move, forcing Jiang Hai and the others to negotiate or let them pass. But they were dreaming. But will things really go as they imagined? When these fishing boats rushed through the firepower blockade of Jiang Hai's 2 fishing boats, these people couldn't help but cheer. They knew that although Jiang Hai's fishing boats were protected, after all, the protection made the water cannons unable to move freely. There was a dead end. If there were a lot of boats, then it would be different. But in a situation where there weren't a lot of boats, this was very fatal. Although some fishing boats lost their water cannons, they still rushed to the side of Jiang Hai's boat. The president couldn't help but laugh. Let's see how you can stop us this time. Looking at Jiang Hai's two fishing boats in the distance, the president's eyes couldn't help but narrow. This time, he believed that Jiang Hai shouldn't be able to stop them. But will things really be as simple as he thought? Just as those fishing boats were about to reach Jiang Hai's fishing boat, Jiang Hai's mouth couldn't help but slightly open. These guys who don't have any water cannons want to deal with him? It can only be said that these guys are really too naive. With Jiang Hai's order, the two 82mm water cannons on both sides also revealed their ferocious appearance. When these two water cannons were pushed out, the fishing boats were stunned. They completely didn't understand where these two water cannons came from, but it didn't prevent them from knowing that this time, they were in trouble. Fire! With Jiang Hai's order, the two water cannons on the side were also activated in an instant. The water dragon spewed out from the valve instantly hit the fishing boats. After all, the 82mm water cannons were not as scary as the 120mm water cannons. However, these fishing boats also had no way to resist the 82mm water cannon. Although it was not like the 120mm water cannon, which felt like it was going to capsize as soon as it rushed up, it was still directly pushed away, unlike the 120mm water cannon that dealt with the large fishing boat. What? There are water cannons? Looking at Jiang Hai's water cannons, the president couldn't help but be surprised. Originally, he thought that Jiang Hai's two 120mm water cannons were already good enough. But he didn't expect that there were more, and they were comparable to his main cannon. Looking at these water cannons constantly pushing away the fishing boats, a trace of shock flashed in his heart. Then he had to smile bitterly. Although he didn't want to admit it, they were bound to lose to Jiang Hai in terms of money. I don't believe it. Let's get on the boat and launch a sneak attack. Looking at his father, who seemed to have aged 10 years in an instant, the president's son didn't think so. After secretly cursing, he was ready to use his own method to deal with Jiang Hai. Although they can't use guns, as long as they climb onto Jiang Hai's boat, then Jiang Hai's water cannons will be useless. Thinking of this, he also said to a few sailors who were on good terms with him. After listening to his words, these sailors immediately went to prepare the speedboats. Not long after, two speedboats came out from the back of the big boat, and then rushed toward Jiang Hai's boat. Looking at these two boats, Jiang Hai couldn't help but chuckle. Indeed, the speed of the speedboats is very fast and flexible. Not to mention 120mm water cannons. Even 82mm water cannons will have a hard time hitting him. But Jiang Hai was already prepared for this. When the two speedboats came from the left and right of Jiang Hai's fishing boat, he was not in a hurry. Not only him, but Edward Anderson, Marin Rupert, and all the sailors were not in a hurry. It's up to you. Looking at Bauer Ramen behind him, who was ready to continue, Marin Rupert said with a smile. Just watch the show. Hearing Marin Rupert's words, Bauer Ramen also smiled evilly. At this time, the two speedboats were about to reach Jiang Hai's ship. They were only about 10 meters away. It would only take them a few seconds to reach Jiang Hai's ship. At this time, the president's son also stood up from his seat. Victory is in front of us, let's go. Pointing at Jiang Hai's two fishing boats in the distance, he also shouted loudly. Just as his voice fell, Carlisle Cotton and Bauer Ramen, who were already prepared, also came out of their respective fishing boats, holding a small water valve in their hands. Looking at the water valve, the people on the two speedboats were stunned for a moment. Then, the people on both sides wanted to turn at the first moment, but unfortunately, their speed was not as fast as the speed of the water. As the two opened the water valve, two water dragons came out in an instant, giving the other party no chance at all. Before the president's son could react, he was hit in the chest again. He was thrown out of the speedboat and fell into the ocean. His chest was hit twice. He felt as if his chest was about to be torn apart. If it weren't for his strong will and his excellent swimming skills, he might have died in an instant. Enduring the dizziness, he floated to the surface of the water. What he saw was the people on the two boats being washed into the sea one by one, including the boat. It was swept far away in an instant. Then, it was hit by the 82mm projectile, and crashed into a fishing boat. The fishing boat was hit by the 82mm projectile, and the speedboat, should be prepared for major repairs. Chapter 771. Aim at the boat over there and attack it with all your might. Jiang Hai looked at the fishing boats that had surrounded them. They had all retreated, including the 2 small boats that had capsized. Jiang Hai's gaze was fixed on the president's boat. As soon as Jiang Hai gave the order, 2 boats and 4 120mm water cannons locked onto the position of the president. Then, 4 water dragons flew out in an instant and crashed heavily into the side of the ship. The huge impact directly shook the ship left and right. Although it was very slight, the people on the ship were frightened. Everyone's face was pale as they grabbed everything they could grab on the ship. Their faces were filled with horror. Quick run! This was especially true for the president. He wasn't young anymore. When he was hit, he was also frightened. He immediately shouted, not even caring about his son. As his voice fell, the people on the ship immediately moved. As soon as the boat turned, it sped in the direction of Boston. This time, Jiang Hai had no intention of letting it go. His goal was not to beat them back, but to let them know what pain was, and who they could not afford to provoke. As soon as Jiang Hai said that, Edward Anderson and Marlon Rupert rushed over. Chase it! The speed of the boat was not as fast as Jiang Hai's boat. It was like a chase. The boat swayed left and right as if it was in a storm. Seeing Jiang Hai's ruthlessness, the other fishing boats followed suit and fled in all directions. Of course, there were still some people who were more particular. They rescued the president's son, who had fallen into the water, onto the boat. Taking advantage of Jiang Hai's lack of time to deal with them, they quickly sped back in the direction they had come from. Jiang Hai just smiled. He did not care about these small fries. What he cared about was the guy who had caused trouble. As they ran, Jiang Hai hit the big boat all the way. To be honest, if these people had not been out to sea all year round and had fought a real storm, they might not have been able to stand it. Even so, many people were already swallowing seasickness medicine. It was too swaying. Other than the swaying, nothing else was better. A lot of glass had been broken by Jiang Hai's water cannon. Some thin iron sheets had also been dented by Jiang Hai's water cannon. It was not an exaggeration to say that the entire ship was swaying in the wind and rain. When Jiang Hai looked at him like this, he felt quite relieved. On the ship, except for the captain, who was still desperately trying to control the ship, the rest of the people were grabbing onto whatever they could. It was too swaying. After more than 2 hours, their victory was in sight. Because there was a place in the distance that they and Jiang Hai were very familiar with. Michelson Green's Fishing Company. At this time, the people in the fishing company also saw Jiang Hai's 2 boats constantly attacking the boat. It really did not look like they were going to let it go. But if they wanted to capsize the boat, they would only attack one side. They should only be attacking one side. But now they were attacking both sides. It was like they were playing with the boat. Jiang Hai's boat number 1 rushed over the boat, then stopped the water, and the other side rushed over. The boat was like a drunk man, swaying forward on the sea. Not to mention the people on the boat. Even the people on the boat were about to vomit. But these people were very tenacious. They quickly ran towards the shipyard in front of them, because they knew that as long as they stopped in the shipyard, they would be safe. Jiang Hai and Michelson had a good relationship, so they should not be attacked by him. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai's attack seemed to be getting wilder and wilder. It was obvious that they wanted to stop him from entering the shipyard. However, these people were determined. They sped up, and their boats almost brushed against the metal poles of the pier as they entered the shipyard. Of course, the boats were completely damaged. But at this time, these people did not have the leisure to care about this. They were just sighing with emotion that they had survived a disaster. At this time, the president let go of his hand and sat down trembling. He did not want to experience this again in his life. Boss, do you want to continue? Looking at the broken boat rushing into the shipyard, Edward Anderson could not help but ask Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai was also thinking about this matter. Then he shook his head. Michelson's background was not simple. If he caused trouble here today, although Jiang Hai was not afraid of him, There was no need to do so. Seeing Jiang Hai shake his head, the people on the shipyard also stopped the water. Then, Jiang Hai came to the bow with a loudspeaker. Let me tell you, the Soaring Dragon Manor's fishing ground was sold to me by the government of Massachusetts. That's my territory. This is a small lesson for you. If I see you in my fishing ground again, I will sink you. Standing at the bow, Jiang Hai said loudly. Listening to Jiang Hai's words, the people in the shipyard heard Jiang Hai's toughness. Since Jiang Hai could chase them from Winthrop to Boston, it could be seen that his words were quite powerful. After saying that, Jiang Hai did not care whether these people heard him or not. He directly returned to the cabin. With an order, the people directly drove the boat in the direction of Jiang Hai's manor. On the way back, they saw a lot of boats passing by. These boats were the fishing boats that went to Jiang Hai's manor. But this time, they were not as arrogant as before. When these boats saw Jiang Hai's boat, they would subconsciously avoid it. They were afraid that Jiang Hai would accidentally think of them. What a joke! Today, they had seen Jiang Hai's toughness. It was estimated that they would not dare to provoke Jiang Hai again. At least, if they sailed over again, they would have to think twice. Unless they directly used weapons, they would not dare to come over. But if they directly used weapons, did you think that the coastal patrol was useless? They were indebted to Jiang Hai. The money they paid was Jiang Hai's. Usually, Jiang Hai would also give them a lot of money. Of course, it was a donation. The Winthrop police station was almost completely new now. A newly painted building, 3 times more police officers than before, and dozens of new police cars. These were all bought with Jiang Hai's taxes and donations. These people's food, accommodation, and daily necessities were all related to Jiang Hai. How could they not work for Jiang Hai? Although the coastal patrol was not like the Winthrop police, Jiang Hai was almost their biological father, and Jiang Hai was almost like their godfather. Last year, Jiang Hai donated $5 million to the coastal patrol to buy 20 helicopters. Of course, 20 helicopters actually cost less than $5 million. It was needless to say where the rest of the money went. Now that they had a conflict with Jiang Hai in the name of avenging their companions, perhaps the police would turn a blind eye to it. As long as they didn't kill anyone, they wouldn't care. But if they used guns, not to mention whether they could beat Jiang Hai or not, the coastal patrol would definitely not let them off easily. So in the current situation, it seemed that they really had no other choice. Force was definitely not enough. Soft. It was probably even more impossible. Jiang Hai was famous for not being moved by force or persuasion. His temper was as stubborn as a bull. This time, they really did not know what to do. Of course, it mainly depended on the president. However, Jiang Hai estimated that after today's incident, these guys would not dare to come again. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai's heart couldn't help but feel happy. Boss, after today, these guys probably won't dare to come again. But we still have to be careful because these guys are likely to put pressure on the state government. It will be very troublesome at that time. Seeing that Jiang Hai seemed to be in a good mood, Edward Anderson, who knew what these fishermen were like, also whispered to Jiang Hai, "Okay, I got it." Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also expressed that he would remember it in his heart. In fact, even if Edward Anderson didn't say it, Jiang Hai also smiled. This time these guys suffered such a big loss. It was impossible for them not to cry a few times. It is said that the crying child gets the milk. These fishermen were like ruffians when they acted shamelessly. But when they acted shamelessly, they were like naughty brats. Moreover, they were spoiled brats. Jiang Hai had long been guarding against them. In fact, this time, he dared to do so because of the state government's words. This was what Jiang Hai was least afraid of. As the 2 ships slowly moved towards the wharf, Jiang Hai and the others also discovered that unknowingly, it was already afternoon. This morning, they woke up very early, which meant that this sea battle had been going on for almost the entire morning. In fact, it was almost the same. The sea battle had been going on for more than an hour. After that, Jiang Hai chased after the president's ship for more than 2 hours. In total, it had been 3 hours, and there was still more than an hour to go. At this time, it was already past noon, and it was already afternoon. Jiang Hai and the others were in a state of mental collapse, so they didn't feel it. But now that they were relaxed, they felt a little tired, a little hot, and most importantly hungry. Okay, let's speed up. I'll ask my family to prepare a delicious meal. Today is a great victory, we must celebrate. Looking at the people around him who were equally tired but in good spirits, Jiang Hai smiled and picked up the satellite phone to inform Qijia and the others at home that they were safe. Then, he told them to prepare a celebration feast. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qijia, Qia, and the others also moved together. Later, after thinking for a while, they told Jiang Hai that instead of just celebrating with the fishermen, it would be better to call Robbins Garcia and the others over at night, as well as Dulles Gerard and O'Connor Murphy. Everyone would have a good time together. After hearing their proposal, Jiang Hai was also full of praise. Then on the way back, they deliberately set a net. Of course, this net was not used to catch ordinary small fish, but to catch big fish. They were all experts in this. After the net was set, a yellowfin tuna weighing more than 50 kilograms appeared in the net. In addition, there were some scattered American redfish and salmon. Jiang Hai picked 2 strong salmon and the tuna, and then threw the other fish back into the sea. These few fish were enough. After returning to the dock, they set some crab cages and shrimp cages. Logically speaking, these things would only be effective after a night. But Jiang Hai's place could not be judged according to common sense. For example, Jiang Hai stuffed some grass in it. After putting the cages in place, Jiang Hai and the others returned to Jiang Hai's villa. There was an empty space there, which was specially set aside by Jiang Hai for barbecue in the wild. After eating some steak and bread that Chia made during this period of time, Edward Anderson and the others packed up together. They threw the beer and wine into the huge freezer, where Jiang Hai usually stored the meat. Then, they went to the forest behind and brought back some firewood. In the afternoon, Dulles Gerard and O'Connor Murphy came back first. They also brought back a few bottles of beer and wine. Of course, this wine was only for those who knew how to drink. It was mainly women who drank it. Otherwise, these few bottles would not be enough for the cowboys and fishermen. In the evening, after Robbins Garcia and the others drove the cattle into the cowshed, they killed a goat and brought it with them. The fire was also ready. Qijia and the others did not stay idle in the afternoon. They marinated a lot of steaks, beef, meatballs, sausages, and made a lot of salads. The meat was skewered with iron filaments. Whatever they wanted to eat, they could just take it and roast it. Philemon Turner's wife also brought a lot of snacks from home. For a while the banquet was quite sumptuous. After 7 o'clock in the evening, the sun set, and the bonfire lit up half of the sky. With Jiang Hai's order, the celebration party began. Tonight, at least for the first half of the night, it would be quite noisy. Fortunately, Jiang Hai had his own courtyard, so no one would hear or disturb him. Just as the banquet on his side was going well, everyone was eating meat and drinking wine. In a bar in Boston, it was very gloomy and depressed. Sitting in the most conspicuous position at the bar was a father and son. Although the father was now dry and refreshed, he still looked very embarrassed. He was holding a glass in his hand, but it was shaking all the time. The son was even more embarrassed at this time. His chest was wrapped with a bunch of bandages. When he raised his hand and breathed, he grimaced in pain. This time we lost. Picking up the glass and drinking half of it, the president said helplessly, "Yes, President, this Jiang Hai is really not a human. He actually hit us with a water cannon, and even hit us. This guy. Rich but heartless. He really should go to hell." Hearing the president's words, someone next to him said, "No matter how these fishermen say that Jiang Hai is wrong, Jiang Hai is wrong, and Jiang Hai is not good. But the fact is the fact. They lost to Jiang Hai, lost to his manner. Now, even if they curse a hole in the sky, they can't do anything about it." At this time, the president's son was no longer clamoring. Because today he almost died. He knew that Jiang Hai was not the kind of person who could be intimidated by threats. He knew that Jiang Hai would really kill people. This time, he was able to keep his life. But what about the next time? It is said that people will grow up after experiencing life and death. It seems that this son has really grown up at this time. This time we lost, but we can't just admit it. We suffered a heavy loss this time. No matter what, we have to let Jiang Hai give us an explanation. Tomorrow, we will go to the Massachusetts state government and ask for an explanation. After drinking the wine in the glass, the president's eyes revealed a sense of helplessness and unwillingness. At the beginning, the government took the initiative to take over this matter, but they did not agree. Because they thought that a Huaxia alone in a foreign land, they just wanted to find a reason to find fault with him. So what if he is a rich man? Just like a great man in Huaxia, Jiang Hai's hometown said, let him hide in the sea of people's war. But who knew, this guy didn't play by the rules at all. He doesn't care about the people's support, he doesn't care about falling out with the people, and he doesn't care about maintaining his own face. Such a person sighed, there is no way. Since that was the case, they might as well give in and see if they could get some money back. Otherwise, they wouldn't have any money to repair their boats. This time, almost everyone's boats were damaged in different ways. This didn't even include the 2 lives that were lost in it. Thinking of this, all the fishermen can't help but sigh. This is not the script they wanted before. No matter what these people think, Jiang Hai played until midnight, and he also drank a lot. After the people left, he went back to the room with the women. Needless to say, Jiang Hai didn't fall asleep until dawn. But don't think that he slept very late. In fact, he woke up very early. He got up at 10 o'clock. It wasn't because he wanted to go to the toilet, but because his phone kept ringing. Hey, wait a minute. Rubbing his hair, Jiang Hai glanced at the phone. The caller was none other than Moses Adams. After picking up, Jiang Hai glanced around. Except for Delina, Marian, Azalina and Galina, the others were around him. They were all naked, and there were more or less some traces of last night. In order not to disturb them, Jiang Hai slowly got up, then walked to the first floor with a bath towel wrapped around him. He sat on the toilet on the first floor and picked up the phone. He was going to take a shower directly after the call. He has a problem. After waking up, it is easy to fall asleep again, so he was also ready to get up. At most, he will go to bed early tonight. Anyway, Jiang Hai stayed at home all day long, and he had nothing to do. Moses, what's the matter? Sitting on the toilet, Jiang Hai took a long breath and asked Moses Adams on the phone. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. Indeed, disturbing the boss in the morning is really not something a subordinate should do, but he has 2 important things now, and he needs to talk to Jiang Hai about them. Boss, I'm really sorry to disturb your sleep, but now there are 2 things here. You have to give me instructions. Listening to Jiang Hai's voice, Moses Adams said to him over the phone, go ahead. Hearing that he really has something to do, although Jiang Hai is a little angry, he will not vent it on his own people. The first thing is still those people from the Fisheries Association. Those people went to the Massachusetts government early this morning and sued you. Of course, they said a lot of crimes such as murder, persecution of fishermen, land enclosure, and so on, but these things are not valid. The state government is not stupid, so the state government did not give any reason, but according to the state government, you asked for some money as a token of appreciation. Listening to Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams also said to Jiang Hai, what do you mean by the politicians there? Although very reluctant, Jiang Hai knows that these guys are best at smoothing things over. Unlike him, these people need people's support, so they definitely can't push him to the opposite side of the people. Otherwise, they won't have anything to do with the next election. Although Jiang Hai didn't need to do anything after all, he was still in Massachusetts. There were some things that he still had to do, so it was good to listen to what those people had to say. They mean that you should pay some money, $100,000. After thinking about it, Moses Adams said to Jiang Hai, I'll give you a quota of 200,000. Let those guys never bother me in the future. Otherwise, I'll spend another 2 million to buy their lives. Jiang Hai is also sleepy now and said to Moses Adams. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams also smiled. He knows that Jiang Hai is not joking, he is serious. There is a second thing. Google sent a letter. The fisherman's matter here is trivial. In Moses Adams' view, The most important thing is actually from Google. Google is recognized as the largest search engine in the world. Even if Google was cheated and forced to withdraw from Huaxia, Baidu also recognized this in the encyclopedia. So there is nothing to say. Everyone said that Google's failure to enter Huaxia was because of Baidu. But in fact, it was mainly related to Google. In addition to the search engine, Google also does a lot of things. One of them is called Google Maps. This map requires the use of satellites to scan the real world's location, etc. However, these things would never be approved by the Huaxia government. After all, if an American company were to know everything about Huaxia's territory, who would take responsibility if something were to happen? So, Google's failure to enter Huaxia can also be said to be caused by themselves. But Google is indeed Google. After their failure to enter Huaxia, they still made a lot of changes. When it comes to the IT industry, the biggest giant is naturally Microsoft, followed by Apple, which rose to become a supergiant in 10 years. Before that, Google had always been the third, but they did not follow the prescribed order. Many people might not know that Android, which is competing with Apple's ISO system, is actually developed by Google. Currently, in the world, other than ISO's Apple operating system and Microsoft's Win operating system, almost 90% of the mobile phones on the market were using Android operating system. In this regard, just the copyright tax alone was enough. As for the AI system, it was obvious that they were at the forefront of the world. In November 2015, Google's unmanned AI business manager revealed that they will launch drone delivery service in 2017. This proves that Microsoft, which specializes in PC, is no match for Google when it comes to AI. Of course, Google is also no match for Microsoft when it comes to PC hacking. After Steve Jobs passed away, Apple no longer has anyone who can compete with them. While Jiang Hai was fighting with the fishermen yesterday, in Mountain View, California, Santa Clara County, California. In the city's most famous landmark, the Google building, the 43-year-old co-founder of Google, Larry Page, walked into his office and threw his clothes on the sofa. His secretary picked up the clothes and hung them neatly on the hanger. However, Larry Page acted as if he didn't see it. He lowered his head and walked quickly to his desk. There is a stack of papers on his desk. It is about a technology. No, it is a game's progress option. Larry Page frowned as he looked at the stack of reports. To be honest, he hated the words written on them. Larry, the new director, sent a letter. While Larry Page was deep in thought, a man with a white beard walked in. If anyone from Google is around, they will recognize this man. He is Larry Page's good friend, and one of the founders of Google, Sergey Brin. The two of them were in the same year, and were good friends from the same school. Although one is American, and the other is Russian, they are very close. The new director? Oh, the director who owns 2% of the shares? After hearing Sergey's words, Larry Page looked away from the stack of reports and asked Sergey with a puzzled look on his face. That's him. But this guy is really mysterious. I only know that his name is Haijiang. Oh, according to the language of his homeland, he should be called Jiang Hai. He's a Chinese and lives in Winthrop. Hearing Larry Page's words, Sergey sat across from him and looked at him with a smile. Did the director say when he would come over to claim the shares? Larry Page asked casually when he heard Sergey's words. It's only 2% of the shares. To be honest, they don't care about it. After all, the two of them relied on this to make a fortune. Each of them now has a net worth of more than 20 billion. They really don't care about 2% of the shares, but this is still a force that needs to be united. No, it seems that this person is not in a hurry at all. But he has already made his position clear. He has no interest in the shares. He handed over the voting rights of these shares to us. He just wants dividends. According to his lawyer, maybe he will come to take a look in the winter. Sergey shrugged and was quite curious about Jiang Hai. This guy is really interesting. He was a little surprised when he heard Sergey's words from Moses Adams. He remembered that the last time, the person who owned these shares was a very annoying guy. That guy really thought that he could do something with his shares, so he was very arrogant. Of course, after being hit by reality, this person became honest. And now, the new owner of the shares seems to be more interesting than that guy. Still having a headache about this direction? When Larry Page looked up, Sergey glanced at the document in front of him. In fact, he also has a copy of this document in his room, but he was too lazy to think about it. Those old people have always thought that virtual reality (VR) is the future development direction. Just like in some online novels, people can wear a helmet and enter a virtual world. But what I want to say is that this kind of technology is not desirable. Earth is our Earth, this world is our world. We don't want to change this world, but we want to think about how to escape from this world. This approach is really naive, so I want to prove to them that increasing AR is our future. Larry Page muttered as he looked at the report in his hand. That's up to you. I'll listen to you completely. However, it was obvious that Sergey Brin wouldn't go against him. He might not be convinced by anyone in terms of technology, but he was convinced by Larry Page. After all, everything he had was given to him by Larry Page. By the way, I remember that our new director is quite young. Since he supports me, let him try out our new product. Larry Page couldn't help but smile. Then he seemed to have remembered something, and he spoke to Sergey Brin. After he spoke, Google sent an email that afternoon. And this email at this time was lying in Jiang Hai's phone. What the hell is this? Jiang Hai looked at the new software installed in the email on his phone. He opened it with some confusion. Jiang Hai also verified his Google account. Then after a start he entered the game. However, in the game, 3 little guys appeared next to his character. As a child, Jiang Hai still recognized these 3 little guys. They were Little Fire Dragon, Wonderful Frog and Ginny Turtle. Is this Pokemon? Jiang Hai looked at the image in front of him. He hesitated and clicked on Little Fire Dragon. In an instant, the image flashed and his phone's camera was turned on. On the tile floor opposite him, a red bald little animal was looking at him with a pair of cute big eyes. Chapter 772. Pokemon Go was a mobile RPG game developed by Nintendo, the Pokemon Company and Google. It was an augmented reality pet training RPG game. In China, it was also known as Pokemon. As for why it was called that, those who had played Emerald Leaf and Emerald Gem would know very well. Jiang Hai hated Japan. He hated the culture, the customs, the politics, and the people there. But there were also a few things that he ignored. People were like this. For some things they liked, they would always ignore where it came from. For example, some teachers who are good at both their skills and morals. Although Jiang Hai has a lot of women, it is understandable for him to watch porn occasionally. He also likes some anime. He likes Naruto and Shinigami, but he likes One Piece. He also likes Dragon Ball, Saint Seiya, Slam Dunk, etc. He also likes the popular One Punch Man. As for games, there are not many people who have not played Japanese games before. For example, the famous Live Football, Silent Hill, Capcom's Lock, Resident Evil, Street Fighter, Dinosaur Crisis, Monster Hunter, Devil May Cry, Sega's Total War, House of Death, Sonic, etc. Although Huaxia people hate Japan, almost all Huaxia people will be familiar with Japanese things. That's why when you go to a bar to drink Rio at night, Rio is from Japan. Some university students, like Jiang Hai in the past, eat instant noodles. Master Kang's main shares are also from Japan. This includes all the online shopping platforms and communication platforms used in China. When Jiang Hai started his business, he had received venture capital from Japan. Jiang Hai is not sure if there are any online shopping platforms now, but he thinks there should be some. After all, those platforms are very profitable. Secondly, even if Feng Yu does not want to admit it, Japan has the highest number of cars in China. That's why Huaxia people are in a dilemma. They want to boycott Japanese products, but most of them cannot live without these things. Jiang Hai used to be an angry young man in the past, but now he is much calmer, even though he still hates Japan. But when it comes to some Japanese products, he will still use them. Of course, if there is a substitute, he will use it. For example, European products or US products. But what's the difference between US products and Japanese products? In any case, in the eyes of some people in China, Japan was evil. As the opposite of China, America was naturally evil, and Europe was naturally evil as well. The only countries that were not evil were probably countries like Pakistan and the like. Of course, the above was just a joke. But now Jiang Hai is playing this game. He is addicted to it. On July 7th, this game will be released in Oceania, which is Australia and New Zealand. Once the game is released, it becomes popular all over the world. All the websites and dating platforms are talking about this game. At first, Jiang Hai didn't pay much attention to it. After all, he didn't leave the house. But since Google sent him the game, he found that he was addicted to playing games like he was in junior high school. For the children in China, there were very few people who didn't know about the Pokemon brand. Of course, everyone knew that it was mainly because of an animated film. But this animated film was actually for the sake of gaming. Just like the Digimon anime, the pet sprite was a game first before the anime. Jiang Hai had played this game before. But his family's financial condition does not allow him to buy GB or GBA games when he was in school. That's why he had only borrowed his classmate's game console to play. When he grew up and got a computer, he had also downloaded the game's emulator on his computer. That's why he is quite familiar with this game. But this game is different from the previous games. This game is not to be played at home. Instead, it is to be played outside. After all, this game is connected to Google Maps. After walking outside, you can use the Pokeball to capture Pokemon. From there, you can gain experience and an item called the Lollipop. This item is specially made for the Pokemon to level up and evolve. It is not like the previous games where you have to beat the Pokemon half to death before you can capture it. This is purely based on luck. The war between the players is mainly near the dojos. Joining a different faction and becoming the dojo master is not a bad choice. Other than that, there are many supply points on the game map. Once you enter the supply points, you can get Pokeballs and other items. It is not bad. Jiang Hai is playing here. Naturally, he asked his friends in China to play as well. However, most of the places in China are already in the trivia area. Maybe it is because the country does not allow Google to enter. But there are some places that are not in the trivia area. For example, the 3 provinces in the northeast and part of Meng province. But these places are not like overseas. According to Jiang Hai's good friend Su Wei, there are Pokemon in the city, but there are only dojos and supply points in the city center. Outside the city, there are no Pokemon. It is a complete blank. No one knows when the local area will be opened. But this has nothing to do with Jiang Hai, because at this time, he is having a good time in the United States. Every morning when he wakes up, he takes his phone and walks around his manor. The usually lazy Jiang Hai has disappeared. This surprised Qi Jie and the others, but after seeing him play this game, they also played it out of curiosity. After that, Jiang Hai is not the only one who is addicted. Every day, they will walk around the manor. And most importantly, Jiang Hai's luck is not bad. The most important thing about this game is that it is realistic. Only places with water will have water-type Pokemon. Only places with mountains will have earth-type Pokemon. So Jiang Hai's manor has everything. There is grass, forest, and sea. Although there are no dojos or supply points in this area, there is quite a variety of Pokemon. In addition, Jiang Hai is Google's client. In order to let Jiang Hai better experience this game, Google specially gave Jiang Hai a pet egg. A pet egg that will definitely hatch a mini dragon. This is considered a benefit. These days, Jiang Hai has caught a lot of Pokemon in his manor. Among them, his main pet is Charmander. It is still Charmander. And it is still Charmander. There is no spawning ground for Charmander on his side. Perhaps because it is closer to the sea, he has spawned a lot of Yanni turtles. The Yanni turtles he caught later evolved into Kami turtles, and then evolved into water arrow turtles. He has collected enough lollipops. In addition, he has Ibucata duck, big tongue shell, supersonic bat, BB bird, Lotta, Thorlip, Cathy, green caterpillar, unicorn bug, and so on. Of course, those weaker Pokemon are not his cup of tea. He is mainly catching these few Pokemon. The first is the water arrow turtle. The second is the supersonic bat, which he has already turned into a big mouth bat. The third is Ibu. Ibu needs 25 lollipops to evolve, but the direction of evolution is not fixed, so Jiang Hai feels uncertain. It evolves randomly. For now, what Jiang Hai wants the most is the lightning-type Pokemon. Because he does not have a lightning-type pet like Pikachu, he only caught a few small magnetic monsters. This game is really not good. BB Bird has already evolved into BB Eagle. Although its potential is not good, it is good that this kind of Pokemon is easy to catch. Currently, he is mainly cultivating these 4 types of Pokemon. As for the others, he is preparing to cultivate his main core, Mini Dragon and Charmander. However, he does not have the spawn points for these 2 types of Pokemon, which is very depressing. But although he is depressing, Jiang Hai is still very happy. Early this morning, after he had breakfast, he took the biggest power bank he bought and left. Little Huang and Xiaobai looked at Jiang Hai and followed him. After Jiang Hai left, Qijia and the others also left the villa and walked around with their phones. They are not as bored as Jiang Hai, but anyway, there is nothing to do. It is always good to walk around. But just as Jiang Hai was walking around, his cell phone suddenly rang. He helplessly watched the game page disappear. Jiang Hai also sighed and glanced at the caller. It made Jiang Hai a little surprised, because he did not know this number. Hello, who is this? Although he was curious whether this is an insurance seller, Jiang Hai still picked up and asked with some doubts. Is this Jiang Hai? Hearing Jiang Hai's voice over the phone, a woman's voice with some uncertainty came from the other side of the phone. It's me you are. Hearing the woman's voice over the phone, Jiang Hai was a little puzzled. This voice is a bit familiar, but not too familiar. Jiang Hai carefully went through it in his mind. He really doesn't seem to know the owner of this voice. It's me, Xia Yuan. After hearing that it was Jiang Hai, Xia Yuan hesitated for a moment and said to Jiang Hai, Xia Yuan? Oh, hello, you haven't contacted me for so long, I thought he. Is there something you need from me? After hearing Xia Yuan's name, a picture flashed in Jiang Hai's mind. It was the young woman he met before entering the mountain. He called her but she never called Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai thought that she just wanted to spend the night with him, so he didn't take the initiative to contact her. It's like this. A group of hooligans came to the shop where I work. One of them should be an Indian girl. She kept saying that she was looking for Winthrop's Jiang Hai, and those people said that they knew Jiang Hai and could take her to Jiang Hai. I was worried that this girl was talking about you, so I called to ask you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Xia Yuan on the other side of the phone couldn't help but blush. She was naturally very clear about the story between her and Jiang Hai. In fact, these days, sometimes she also thought about Jiang Hai. However, she knew that she and Jiang Hai were not people of the same world, so it was better not to contact him. This was better for herself and Jiang Hai. However, after what happened today, she still called Jiang Hai. Indian girl? Is her name Tarak? Hearing Xia Yuan's words, Jiang Hai's first impression was of the little girl, who was sleeping on the bed, and looking at him, when he was in the Tuajia tribe. Shouldn't she be in the mountains? Why did she appear? I don't know, but it seems that she just came out of the mountains. Those who deceived her are not good people. If you know them, then you have to think of a way. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Xia Yuan said very seriously. As mentioned before, Xia Yuan's town is also next to the Alabama mountain range. It's a lawless area, very chaotic, but the public security is good. But even if it's good, chaos means that there are many bad people. Xia Yuan is a local snake. If she said that those people are not good people, then those people are probably not good people. Jiang Hai's brain also turned for a moment. If it's really Tarak, why did she come out of the mountains? Why didn't she call him after coming out? But no matter how many doubts he has now, since he knows that an Indian girl like Tarak was deceived by a group of hooligans, Jiang Hai can't just ignore everything. Then you wait for me, I'll go there now. After speaking to Xia Yuan on the other side of the phone, Jiang Hai put away his phone and quickly ran back to the front of his villa. He just happened to see Jialina, who was practicing her kicks in the middle of the building. Jialina, come with me, bring the weapons. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Jialina was a little curious, but she still packed up and quickly returned to her room to take a shower, then put on a slim-fit clothes and left Jiang Hai's villa with 2 pistols. Jiang Hai also went upstairs to change his clothes and came down. Although he has been back for a long time, the shield has not been repaired. This time they can only drive the Tesla. When they went, he specifically called Chijia and told them that he had something to do, and he didn't know if he would come back at night. There is no need to worry about safety. After all, Jia Lina will help to look after him. After the phone call, the two also got in the car and rushed straight to the town where Xia Yuan was. At this time, in a dilapidated room in the town where Xia Yuan was located, there were 4 hooligans gathered there to play cards, and in the distance, there was a girl whose hands and feet were tied, and her mouth was covered with a piece of tape. If Jiang Hai was here, he would definitely recognize that this girl was none other than Tarak, who he had met once before, but at this time, her face was full of panic, and a pair of big eyes were also looking at the people in front of her in horror. Looking at her appearance, the 4 men chuckled, then turned their heads and continued to play cards. I don't want to play. I don't want to play. My luck is really bad today. Throwing the cards in his hand on the table, a white man leaned on his chair with an unhappy face, then took out a cigarette and lit it up, looking at the people in front of him with an unhappy face. Haha, your luck is really bad today. Hearing this man's words, a person next to him couldn't help but laugh. Then he grabbed the green dollars in front of him, then sorted them out one by one, and put them in his pocket. Damn, you are really King lucky. By the way, boss, this girl's figure and appearance are quite good. Do you want us to try her first? Looking at the evil face of his companion, this guy couldn't help but curse. Then he looked up and saw Tarak tied there, licked his lips, and said with a smile, "Try your ass, this guy is looking for Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai and Chelsea's boss Edith have a grudge. This woman is the person he wants. Besides, such a good thing, you want to do it? You know, her first time or not, the price is far different." Glancing at him faintly, the man opposite him said disdainfully, TSK, I haven't felt such a good quality woman. It's a pity not to let her come." Listening to the boss's words, the white man clicked his tongue twice, but his eyes were staring at Tarak. He won't give up so easily. It was really an accident that they met Tarak. Tarak came out of the mountain today. After she first asked for the location, she was going to go to Winthrop to find Jiang Hai, but she didn't expect that the person she asked didn't know where Winthrop was. That person was also an old Chinese man. He didn't understand English, so he didn't know what she was talking about. After hearing her words, the 4 guys here told her that they knew Jiang Hai and could take her to Winthrop. Then, the 4 of them took her to a nearby supermarket to buy some things. Xia Yuan, who has been working hard to learn English recently, accidentally heard their conversation. After remembering who the 4 people were, she called Jiang Hai. But unfortunately, after the 4 people took Tarak back to their room, they tied her up, then called Edith and told him about it. The names of Jiang Hai and Edith are actually very famous in the whole Boston area. Of course, Edith's name is much more famous than Jiang Hai's. Jiang Hai's name is nothing more than a rich man from Huaxia, who has a good relationship with the government. The only thing that is famous is his fight with the fishermen a few days ago. In their view, the one who finally admitted defeat was Jiang Hai. Otherwise, why would he pay? That's $200,000. It's enough to keep 2 fishing boats busy for a year. In their view, Jiang Hai is a person who only knows how to spend money to settle things. In fact, in the eyes of those hoodlums, they really look down on Jiang Hai. After all, Jiang Hai's deeds are not known to others. But Edith is different. This guy has been the underground emperor of the Boston area for a long time. He opened a casino and enjoyed both gray and white. If they had to choose between Jiang Hai and Edith, they would definitely choose Edith. But they are wrong about one thing. Edith doesn't dare to provoke Jiang Hai, but they don't know this. And most importantly, the call they made was not to Kristen Edith, but to his son, Izzo Edith. Izzo Edith doesn't have as good a foresight as his father. His father knows that Jiang Hai can't be provoked, but he doesn't know. He only knows that his family has fallen many times because of Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai doesn't give them any face. Even a while ago, in order to avoid Jiang Hai, they closed the casino. If the casino was closed, not only would they lose their main source of income, but most importantly, they would lose their venue. For the past few days, Izoatis had been very uncomfortable. He did not understand why his father was afraid of a cow seller. After receiving the phone call today, he had some ideas in his heart, but he still needed to plan how to do it. However, he told those people to keep an eye on Tarek. Since it was related to Jiang Hai, then he had to make sure that it worked well. Then he went to find a few of his friends, ready to find a way to trick Jiang Hai from this girl. Now they are thinking about whether to kidnap the girl directly, and then call Jiang Hai to come to them. Then they can blackmail Jiang Hai, or directly kill Jiang Hai to save his father and family some trouble here. Thinking of this, they feel that it is better to do it once and for all, because they are not short of money. But they don't know that while these people are planning there, Jiang Hai and Jialina have already driven to the town where Xia Yuan is. According to her, after Jiang Hai parked the car in front of the Xishang supermarket, Xia Yuan also ran out. When she saw Jiang Hai, she clearly smiled, but when she saw Jialina, her face froze for a moment. Then she nodded to Jialina unwillingly, but Jialina, who was chewing gum at this time, ignored her. She still sat there, chewing gum and listening to music. Looking at her, Xia Yuan shrugged and sat in the car. "This is your girlfriend? So fierce," Xia Yuan said in a low voice as she gently poked Jiang Hai. Kind of. Hearing Xia Yuan's words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment. Then he found that Jialina's body also trembled. He knew that she heard Xia Yuan's words, so he said with a smile, "If she is really Jiang Hai's girlfriend, then she will have to find trouble with Jiang Hai." But the problem was that she wasn't. She was just Jiang Hai's servant and bodyguard. Now that Jiang Hai said that she was one, it made her heart feel warm. However, she didn't show it on her face. She just sat there and chewed her gum. "What's going on?" Starting the engine, Jiang Hai asked Xia Yuan while driving in the direction she pointed. This town is actually not big. Xia Yuan is really familiar with the neighborhood. Plus there is a white girl in her supermarket who lives near these people. So she naturally knows the situation here. And just as Jiang Hai was searching for these people, Izoatis over there had also made up his mind. If he wants to do it, he will do it big. No one will go against them for a dead person. He had already inquired about it. Jiang Hai didn't have any immediate relatives. His only wife was still in the country. If something happened, he would just have to run away for a while. He believed that in the land of Boston, their family was still the overlord. He has to admit that sometimes young people do things in one word, fierce. And sometimes their thinking is too simple. What does it mean that no one will avenge Jiang Hai? Whether Jiang Hai is there or not, his manner is there, his women are there. Even if it is for the sake of face, they will not go against the Atis family. Moreover, does he really think that he can beat Jiang Hai? She was really naive to the extreme. But in any case, these young people in the United States only have one word: charge. Since he made the decision, Izoatis found a few of his friends and prepared to give Jiang Hai a special meeting. After learning of Izo's decision, while Jiang Hai was looking for these people, the 4 people who kidnapped Tarak also received a call from Izo. Izo said on the phone that as long as the matter is done, these 4 people will become the managers of their family's casino. Also, each of them would be paid $50,000. These people were very excited about the money and the fact that their jobs would be solved, so they agreed on the spot. Then these people were afraid that Izoatis couldn't find the location, so the boss deliberately took 2 people to pick them up. And the guy who had evil intentions at the beginning stayed in the room to watch Tarak, in case of any accidents. After hearing that these people left, the man couldn't help but stand up from the chair with an evil smile on his face, then walked in front of Tarak, squatted down, and looked at Tarak's face. He couldn't help but laugh. Such a beautiful face, such a good figure. If I can't do it, it would be a waste. Hee, the boss said that I can't do it directly. Then you have to take the initiative. If you don't want to suffer, use your little mouth to relieve me. Grabbing Tarak's hair, the white man's eyes were full of flames of desire. His nose gently sniffed Tarak's neck, and his mouth was full of obscene words. Hearing his words, Tarak immediately struggled. What a joke. She didn't want anything to happen between her and this guy. But looking at Tarak's struggle, the man became more excited. His hands forcibly fixed Tarak's head. Then he was about to kiss her. But at this moment, there was a sudden knock on the door. Hearing the knock on the door, the man couldn't help but froze for a moment, but he didn't care. He continued to prepare for violence. But the knocking didn't stop until he was a little annoyed. Then he let go of his hand. "Who is it?" The guy shouted at the door. It could be heard that he had a bad temper. "It's me. Did anyone call for service here?" Because when they came here, they already heard from Xia Yuan that these four guys are not good people. In order to trick the door open, Jiang Hai and Jialina deliberately made this plan. Now the one who spoke is Jialina. Xia Yuan is still in the car, and Jiang Hai won't let her take the risk. "Service?" Hearing the man's words, the man couldn't help murmuring out of curiosity. Could it be that his boss was afraid that I couldn't control my primitive strength when I looked at people here? Therefore, he specially called one for me before leaving? Thinking of this possibility, the man couldn't help but laugh. If someone can help him vent, he doesn't mind letting this little girl go. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but stand up and walk to the door. Looking through the peephole in the door, he saw Jialina's cold and handsome face, as well as her perfect figure. Maybe she felt his footsteps. Jialina deliberately smiled at him. Looking at the mature Jialina, the man's desire was instantly awakened by Tarak. He really hasn't seen anyone as beautiful as Jialina in this line of work. After all, he's not a habitual criminal, nor is he professionally trained. This guy doesn't know that he should be careful and vigilant at this time. He just felt that his lower part seemed to be harder, so without saying anything, he directly opened the door. But the moment the door opened, a gun was pointed at his head. Jiang Hai and Jialina slowly walked into the room. When Jiang Hai saw Tarak tied up there, his eyes narrowed. "Brother, if you have something to say, we're from Edith. You know Edith, we're definitely the local tyrant here. If you offend us, you won't be able to survive in Boston." Raising his hands high, this guy calmed down in an instant. Seeing the anger in Jiang Hai's eyes, he didn't know who Jiang Hai is, and he hasn't seen Jiang Hai before. However, he knew that this person was most likely here to save the girl. It was useless to beg for mercy now, so he could only threaten. The easiest way to use the tiger's skin as a flag was to find a local bully to protect him. Edith was obviously a good choice. "Oh, there's something about Edith in this?" Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but chuckle. He really didn't expect that there would be something about Kristen Edith here. Ever since he was surrounded in the casino that time, Jiang Hai has already begun to prepare to deal with these three guys. Although Kristen, Edith made his stance clear at the scene, Jiang Hai wasn't ready to let him go. But this guy is smart enough. After Jiang Hai left, his casino closed in the afternoon, and then he disappeared. Jiang Hai couldn't find any trouble with him, so he prepared to deal with the three guys first, then deal with him. But he didn't expect that he would be inexplicably involved today. It seems that this matter is getting more and more interesting. Bang! Thinking of this, Jiang Hai didn't say anything and directly shot the man in the leg. The .50 caliber Desert Eagle almost blew up the man's thigh. The man covered his leg and kept screaming. That scream was even louder than the sound of a pig being slaughtered, but Jiang Hai didn't care. In order not to let him continue to stimulate his eardrums, Jiang Hai went up and kicked him until he fainted, then walked towards Tarak. Chapter 773. Woo, you scared me to death. I thought I would never see you again. After Jiang Hai slowly tore off the rope and the tape on Tarak's mouth, Tarak couldn't help but hug Jiang Hai's neck and cry loudly. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but sigh. After all, this girl is still inexperienced. Okay, I'm here to save you. But why didn't you call me when you came out? I remember that there is a satellite phone in the tribe. Looking at Tarak in front of him, Jiang Hai patted her back gently. After the girl's mood gradually calmed down, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at her and asked with some doubts. Yes, it's because the patriarch asked me to give this to you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl took out a letter from her back. Fortunately, she hid this letter very well and didn't take it out, so these people didn't know about it. Okay, I got it. Jiang Hai nodded after hearing her words. Since the old patriarch asked her to come, there must be some secrets in it. But Jiang Hai can't say it at this time. He just took the letter and stuffed it into his pocket. In Boston, no one dares to steal his things. Jiang Hai, a group of people is coming. Just as Jiang Hai put away the letter, his cell phone suddenly rang. When he picked it up, it was Xia Yuan's voice. Hearing her voice, Jiang Hai also gave Jialina a look. Jialina came to the window in a few steps, glanced at it, and gestured a few times to Jiang Hai. There are a total of 2 cars and 3 motorcycles. On the 3 motorcycles they should be with this guy. There are also 2 cars. They shouldn't be the people behind these people. Hee hee, this time we can catch them all in one fell swoop. Squinting his eyes, Jiang Hai immediately said to Xia Yuan. Because Jiang Hai's car was originally parked some distance away from this community, Jiang Hai asked Xia Yuan to lock the car and hide well. They shouldn't notice her. Jiang Hai immediately hid Tarlac under the bed. Under Jiang Hai's signal, Jialina easily hid behind the refrigerator. Jiang Hai took out his Google Glass, put it on his eyes, and turned on the video. Just like that, he sat on the table and waited for the arrival of these people. His hand was still fiddling with the big eagle in his hand. After everything was ready, not long after, the 3 motorcycles and 2 cars stopped in front of the door. Looking at the door that was opened, the faces of the 3 people on the side changed at the same time. The 8 people who got out of the car after dinner also looked at each other. It was obvious that something had happened. Let's go in and see. Seeing this scene, Izoatis couldn't help but take out a Beretta 92F from his back. Looking at his action, the others also took out their guns. But after all, they are just some gangsters. The only thing they can get are pistols. 11 people, 11 guns slowly walked into the room. The 3 people who came in first turned the corner and saw their companion lying on the ground, and Jiang Hai sitting at the table. Seeing this scene, they didn't need to say anything. They directly raised their guns to shoot, but Jiang Hai was faster. Bang, bang, bang. With 3 consecutive sounds, the arms of the 3 people holding the guns were shot in an instant. The pistols fell directly in the distance, and they squatted down while covering their hands, screaming constantly. Seeing this scene, Izo and the others also wanted to shoot directly, but they saw that Jiang Hai had already raised his gun. Looking at Jiang Hai's understatement, Izo waved his hand and asked everyone to stop first. Wait a minute, Jiang Hai. I am Izoatis. My father is Kristen Atis. I think we may have some misunderstanding. Looking at Jiang Hai's raised hand, the man swallowed a mouthful of saliva and said, he didn't think that Jiang Hai, who looked very weak, would be so ruthless. Moreover, his marksmanship was quite accurate. He watched as the 3 men's hands were blown up. And the most important thing is that he doesn't know the situation in this room. Is there only Jiang Hai? Or they have been surrounded. So now, it's actually a good choice to admit defeat. Kristen is getting bolder and bolder. He even dared to kidnap my people. You are really arrogant. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai continued to sit there, looking at the people in front of him with an indifferent face. The pistol knocked on the table from time to time. I think you may have really misunderstood. It was these 4 guys who kidnapped that person. We just heard about it, and decided to come and have a look. If I really know you, then I will send this girl back to you. We are doing this out of kindness, but I think you may be a little too sensitive. Looking at Jiang Hai, Izoatis said with a smile. While talking, they moved into the room, moving very slowly. After Jiang Hai heard his words, he seemed to believe them, and did not react to their movement. In this way, Izo and the 8 people slowly moved into the room, but when they saw that there was only Jiang Hai in the room, they were clearly stunned for a moment, and then these people felt their hearts begin to beat faster. Only you. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of him, Izoatis said with some doubts. Although the appearance of Jiang Hai completely disrupted his thoughts, according to his original idea, they came here to pick up the girl. After taking the girl and confirming her relationship with Jiang Hai, they would take her to the casino or their territory, and then force Jiang Hai to come to the appointment himself, and then find a chance to kill Jiang Hai. Of course, they basically learned this from the movies, but now that Jiang Hai appeared here, they were a little surprised. Originally, he thought that there was no chance. But who would have thought that Jiang Hai was sitting here alone? Yes, it's just me. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai said calmly, "Hey, if it's only you, then you can go to hell." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Aizo had already raised his gun in an instant, aiming at Jiang Hai, and was about to shoot. But Jiang Hai's speed was faster. In an instant, 4 more bullets were fired. The 4 guys standing in front of him, who were holding guns, were instantly shot by the bullets, and the guns flew directly to the distance. Aizo was also standing in front of them. In an instant, he felt that his hands were no longer his own. He had no way to control them at all, but the piercing pain kept coming. But after all, he was also Kristen Adis's son. In such a situation, he did not admit defeat, and immediately rushed to pick up the gun that had fallen. The other 4 people who were not shot also raised their guns in their hands. But at this time, Jiang Hai was still sitting in the same place, and a figure flashed behind the refrigerator. After this person appeared, he took out 2 pistols without saying a word. These 2 pistols are Czech CZ-75, the most classic model of Czech pistols. In fact, it is more suitable for men to use. It is powerful and handsome. It is much better than the CZ-83. At the same time, the 2 guns were also pointed at other people. If other people dared to move at this time, then she didn't mind directly shooting them. Seeing these guys who were courting death were subdued in an instant, Jiang Hai also shrugged. After sitting in the same place and changing the magazine, he slowly stood up, then walked in front of these people. After kicking away all the pistols on the ground, he squatted down. "Speak." Looking at Aizo Adis, Jiang Hai said very plainly. Listening to Jiang Hai's plain voice, the people here were dumbfounded, because they didn't know what to do next. "Speak." "Speak what?" Listening to Jiang Hai's words, Aizo Adis glared at him, and said with a face full of anger, "Tell me how you are courting death, who told you to kidnap Tarak, and why you ambushed me." Hearing this man's words, Jiang Hai said slowly, although he didn't know the details of this guy's plan. This guy followed these people, and when he saw that he was alone, he even took the initiative to attack, which means that he was looking for trouble. His glasses recorded everything clearly at this time. This is not a movie. What he has to do now is an interrogation. "Bah, if you have the ability, kill me, you yellow monkey." Falling into Jiang Hai's hands, Aizo Adis was also a little crazy. He knew that this time he was in trouble, big trouble. Instead of this, he might as well die. But Jiang Hai smiled, then gently stood up and glanced at Jialina. When Jiang Hai turned his head to look at the others, Jialina instantly covered Aizo Adis's mouth. Then she exerted force on her military boots. In an instant, Aizo Adis's left index finger softly fell to the ground. His finger was directly crushed under her foot. His fingers were connected to his heart. It would be strange if Aizo Adis didn't scream, but his mouth was blocked, so he couldn't make a sound. He could only watch helplessly as Jialina broke his index finger, then moved her foot to the position of his middle finger. Then in an instant she stomped down, and there was a sound of bones being crushed. At this time in the room, except for the still calm Jiang Hai, everyone's eyes were full of horror. They heard that Jiang Hai was a cattle breeder. How could a cattle breeder be so ruthless? But Jiang Hai didn't have the obligation to explain to them. He squatted down and looked at another person, looking at him very calmly. "If he doesn't want to talk, then are you going to talk?" Looking at this person, Jiang Hai said very calmly, "It doesn't matter if you don't want to talk. I have 11 people here who can ask. Oh, 9 people besides you." Looking at this person, Jiang Hai said very indifferently, as if he really didn't want to know the news from this person's mouth. His indifference was somewhat excessive. "I'll talk." Looking at Adis, whose 3rd finger was broken, a trace of horror flashed in this person's eyes. Then after hesitating for a moment, he was ready to talk. After all, human life is very important in the United States. This cough, this is actually just a coincidence. The 4 guys over there kidnapped the girl who came to look for you. And then they knew that you and Mr. Adis had a grudge, so they asked Aizo. Aizo just said that he came over to take a look, but he didn't expect that you would arrive first. This person was still loyal, of course. He was also making fun of himself. According to them, they just came over to take a look, not to trouble Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai smiled. This guy really talks big. At this time, Jia Lina had also dealt with isoatus. Seeing Jiang Hai looking over, she walked directly to this person. Don't, I'm telling the truth, don't. Seeing the demoness Jia Lina appear, this person also panicked and shouted loudly. But halfway through, Jia Lina covered his mouth and stepped on his finger without saying a word. Looking at the person over there, screaming in horror, and looking like he was in so much pain that he wanted to die, the others trembled. They felt that they were really too naive at the beginning. Kristen Adis was right not to trouble Jiang Hai. This Jiang Hai was not someone they could compare with. This guy was not only a cattle breeder, but he also had a strong martial strength. His hands were cold and his heart was black. He didn't give them a way out at all. Now there are 8 more questions to ask. Are you ready to answer? But the premise is that you don't treat me as a fool anymore. If you really encountered this matter by chance, you wouldn't have shot me directly when you saw me, right? Walking to the front of another person, Jiang Hai squatted down, his eyes exuding an evil light, but unfortunately, his glasses couldn't reach them. Okay, I'll talk. The effect of being frightened by Jia Lina was also infinitely magnified at this time. After hesitating for a moment, this guy was ready to talk. In fact, kidnapping Tarak was not instructed by Izo. It was done by these 4 people. But after Izo learned the news, he was ready to take the girl away and use her to threaten Jiang Hai, then kill Jiang Hai. Although the plan was very simple, the purpose was very clear, to kill Jiang Hai. I just came with him to take a look. It's not my fault. After saying that, he deliberately washed himself. But Jiang Hai didn't care about this. After laughing, he patted his face and continued to ask the people behind him. After everyone asked clearly, Jiang Hai also signaled Tarak to come out. Although Tarak is a little girl, she has seen a lot of things. With her help, she took the rope that was used to tie up these people. After tying these people up, Jiang Hai also looked for his phone and found Doyle George's phone number. This Doyle George's relationship with Jiang Hai is still very good. After all, they can be regarded as friends of life and death. When he was an intern in Winthrop, he fought side by side with Jiang Hai. Later, because of his meritorious service, he was transferred back to Boston and was directly promoted to inspector in the Boston Police Department. It is said that his family has a lot of connections, but his relationship with Jiang Hai has always been good, and they keep in touch. When Jiang Hai went to Boston a while ago, they even had a meal together. Now that such a thing has happened, he can't trust the local police. After all, this is also Chelsea's territory, and Kristen Adis has a lot of power in Chelsea. After Jiang Hai called, Doyle George heard Jiang Hai's words and immediately dispatched the police. At the same time, he notified the state. After several police cars arrived in the area, they arrested the 12 people and took them to the police station before the local police could do anything. Jiang Hai, Tarak, and Xia Yuan were also taken to the police station. Of course, after all, they were acquaintances, so they weren't handcuffed. Secondly, they weren't too serious. They just sat in the car and went over. As for Jia Lina, she drove back to Jiang Hai's manor. She still had to go back and report her safety. When Jiang Hai entered the police station, Moses Adams also came. As for the 12 people, they were all sent to the hospital by the police. Of course, everyone's hands were handcuffed, and there were guards standing outside. But at this time, outside a hospital in Boston, after a black Lincoln stopped, an anxious middle-aged man quickly ran into the hospital. After finding the room he was looking for, he was about to go inside. But just as he walked in, 2 policemen came in front of him and motioned him to stop. I just want to see my son's situation. Please, I know your speaker, and I also know the people in your police station. Seeing the 2 policemen stop him, the middle-aged man immediately said anxiously. He was really anxious now. After all, his son was in the ward in front of him, and he could only stand outside helplessly. Are you Mr. Kristen Adis? Sorry, the order from above. No one is allowed to enter the room. Hearing his words, the 2 policemen here couldn't help but look at each other. and then said very seriously, "How can you do this, please? You have to understand the heart of a father." Seeing that the two policemen were stubborn, Kristen Addis also said with a look of horror and helplessness, "This is really not possible, Mr. Addis." Hearing his words, the two policemen still shook their heads. This was a strict order from above. They didn't dare to let Kristen Addis go easily. This was a dead end. Izzo Addis wanted to murder Jiang Hai, even participated in the kidnapping, and took the initiative to shoot at Jiang Hai. These were all captured by Jiang Hai's Google glasses, and there was no chance to argue anything. It was not an exaggeration to say that this was irrefutable evidence. Of course, there would also be some people who would pester endlessly, but the problem was that Moses Adams was not someone to be trifled with. It was absolutely impossible for him to handle this case with irrefutable evidence. If he did, Jiang Hai would not be able to cooperate with him anymore. For lawyers, the word mistake could never exist because it was linked to money. Coupled with Jiang Hai's own strength, everyone knew that Jiang Hai would not let these people go easily. Now was the time to pick a side, so these two policemen would inevitably stick to their posts. "What if I let him in?" But at this moment, a slightly majestic voice came from the side of the corridor. The two policemen looked up and saw a majestic white man coming in from outside. "Mr. Patterson." Seeing this majestic white man, the three people here whispered in a low voice, especially Kristen Addis. His eyes were originally a bit gray, but at this time, they glowed with a new color. "Mr. Patterson, this case was ordered by the State Supreme Police, so we are doing our duty." "Sorry." Looking at the man in front of them, the two policemen hesitated, then gritted their teeth and said, just like what they said, this man named Patterson was not an ordinary person. His full name was Javi Patroni, and he was the current leader of the Massachusetts Democratic Party. Although he was only a state senator in name, he had retired from the House of Lords. His status and ability were frighteningly powerful in Massachusetts. Everyone knew that the United States was a multi-party country, but in fact, there were mainly two parties in charge, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Anyone who knew the history of the United States knew very well that these two parties were actually split from one party. At the beginning, there was only the Democratic Party, which was established in 1791 by some planters, farmers, and some capitalists who had connections with the slave owners in the South. Later, it was renamed the Republican Party, and the Democratic Party was officially established in 1828. They became the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. The two parties had different policies. The Democratic Party was a left-wing liberal party. They preferred a more radical approach to governance. Most of the presidents in the United States were from the Democratic Party, such as the famous Roosevelt, Truman, Kennedy, Clinton. Even the current president, O'Hare, was from the Democratic Party. Their power was indeed greater than the Republican Party's. Of course, the Republican Party's conservative views were also the reason why they were unpopular. In Massachusetts, every party was a stronghold of the Democratic Party. This showed how much influence this middle-aged man named Javi Patterson had here. He was actually Kristen Addis's nominal protection. Of course, he could only help him a little. After all, he was only a former member of the House of Representatives, and now he was only a state senator. In the United States, people were more particular about the cooling of the tea after the person left. He was now a person with a reputation and a tree's shadow. If you respected him, you respected him. If you didn't respect him, you didn't care. At least, he was not a match for Jiang Hai, who was now at the peak of his power. Looking at the attitude of the two policemen in front of him, it could be seen. Generally, such old people were very concerned about their reputation. The more you didn't want them to do something, the more they would do it. What's more, in his opinion, he couldn't keep Kristen Addis's child. The only thing he could do was to help Kristen Addis take care of his child. Now that he couldn't even help, it was really shameful. I guarantee on my reputation that you let him in for 10 minutes. If you don't let him in, I will go to the police station tomorrow and cause trouble for you," Patterson said fiercely as he looked at the two policemen. It seemed that they were really frightened by the old man's appearance. The two policemen couldn't help but look at each other hesitantly. Since Mr. Patterson is your guarantor, 10 minutes, don't make it difficult for us. Finally, after hesitating for a while, one of the policemen spoke first. Hearing that these policemen finally compromised, Patterson also smiled. Kristen Addis naturally thanked him, then hurriedly ran in. When he came in, Izzo Addis had already woken up. At first, he was sent to the hospital in a coma. The pain of his broken finger, coupled with the constant bleeding, made him lose consciousness. The hospital arranged an operation on the spot. They cleaned the bones in his finger, took out the bullet, bandaged the wound, and injected new blood. Although only a few hours had passed, Izzo Addis had already woken up. His whole person seemed to be a little stupid. He just stared at the ceiling blankly, without speaking or moving. If it weren't for the occasional blink of his eyes, others might think that he was dead. When Kristen Addis walked into the ward, a glimmer of light flashed in his eyes, but then it dimmed again. "Dad, I've caused you trouble." He knew that with what he had done, coupled with Jiang Hai's actions, he was doomed. Jiang Hai was not a saint. He would definitely not let him live, so he knew that he was doomed. His father couldn't save him. The only thing he felt guilty about now was that he had caused trouble for his father. He was worried that after he died, Jiang Hai would not let go of his father. Then he would be really unfilial. In fact, in terms of father-son relationship, Izzo respected Kristen very much. This was because he never talked back to his father. He would take the initiative to do what his father told him to do. If his father didn't tell him to do it, he would think for his father. These things showed that he could be regarded as a filial child. Unfortunately, he provoked someone he shouldn't have. "Silly child, what are you talking about? You'll be fine, and I'll be fine. I'll find a way. What you have to do is to rest and recover. And then wait." Looking at Izzo Addis, Kristen Addis whispered. He also knew that if he went through the normal legal route, his son would be dead. Although the old man outside was his backer, with the amount of tax Jiang Hai pays every year, plus the money in Jiang Hai's pocket, the old man would not be a match for Jiang Hai. After saying this, Kristen Addis left. After watching him leave, the police on the other side didn't say anything. Patron looked at Kristen Addis's appearance. After thinking for a while, he followed him out. "Young man, this time your son was too unwise. I just got the news that Jiang Hai became a shareholder of Google a while ago. The kind that owns shares, you. What can I say?" Walking out of the hospital, Patron sighed and said helplessly. He came to see Kristen Addis. In fact, he had done his best. "I understand, Mr. Patron. I'm just afraid that this will involve you." Hearing Patron's words, Kristen Addis laughed a little self-deprecatingly and said to Patron, "It doesn't matter. I still have connections in Massachusetts. No matter how strong Jiang Hai is, it won't be so easy for him to deal with me." Patron shook his head and said proudly. Hearing his words, Kristen Addis just smiled. Then he got into his Lincoln and left the hospital. No one knew where he went. As the sky gradually darkened, Doyle George also walked into his office from outside. "Phew, today is really tiring." Seeing Jiang Hai chatting and laughing with the two beauties, he couldn't help but shake his head helplessly. Then he hung his clothes on the hanger and walked to Jiang Hai's side. "Is it done?" Seeing him coming over, Jiang Hai didn't want to occupy his chair anymore. He stood up directly and walked to the open space, while Doyle George slumped directly on the chair. "Well, it's done. This time, they are dead. But you have to be careful. Kristen Addis is not a good person. He may do something desperate." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Doyle George also said to them seriously, "Oh, I naturally know that, but this time, thank you very much. Come to my place when you have time. I have prepared a lot of beef and fish for you." Patting Doyle on the shoulder, Jiang Hai said with a smile, "Oh, is this a bribe?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Doyle George said with a smile, "Jiang Hai's beef and fish are very popular in Boston recently." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, he knew that the amount is indispensable. "Then you can also eat at my place before you leave." Shrugging, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Doyle George also laughed. He naturally can't leave after eating, but he is quite interested in these things. "Haha, then I'll thank you in advance. Your things here are done. Do you want me to send you back?" Chapter 774. It's a little late now. Do you want to stay in Boston for a night before leaving? Walking out of the police station, Jiang Hai rejected Doyle George's proposal to send them back in the police car. Moses Adams was still running around, and Jiang Hai asked Xia Yuan. Now there were 3 people here, Jiang Hai, Xia Yuan and Tarak. Tarak would definitely follow Jiang Hai. As for Xia Yuan, Jiang Hai had to ask. After all, she still had a girl at home. It's okay. I've already asked my colleague to pick up my daughter. There shouldn't be any problems. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Xia Yuan thought for a moment. She originally wanted to refuse, but when the words came to her mouth, she changed her mind. Indeed, she was not too worried about her daughter because she used to work 2 or even 3 jobs. So at night, sometimes she would go home very late. Although she did not stay out all night, it did not matter if she stayed out all night. However, recently, because she was promoted to the supervisor of the Xishang supermarket, her salary and treatment had improved a lot. She did not have to work part-time anymore, and her life was much better. Although she did not understand why, looking at Jiang Hai's power today, she vaguely felt that it might be related to Jiang Hai. However, she did not mean to say it, and Jiang Hai did not want to say it either. Well, let's eat something first, and then find a place to rest for the night. Hearing Xia Yuan's words, Jiang Hai also smiled, then called a taxi and went to a famous 5-star hotel in Boston. The reason why Jiang Hai was familiar with this hotel was mainly because Jiang Hai himself also had a cooperative relationship with this hotel. One of the fish he sold was from this hotel. At the front desk of the hotel, Jiang Hai originally planned to book 3 rooms, 1 suite and 2 standard rooms. With his current status, staying in a hotel and not a suite was out of the question. But after hearing that there were 2 rooms in the suite, Xia Yuan did not let Jiang Hai book another room. Tarak was also very scared at this time, so it was a good choice to live with Jiang Hai. For their proposal, Jiang Hai just shrugged and agreed. In fact, when a woman was ready to live in a room with you, it was needless to say what it meant. Especially when this woman had some intimate contact with you before this. After booking a suite, Jiang Hai and the others went up to take a look. There was a master bedroom, a guest bedroom, and 2 bathrooms. Everything was good. After looking around, Jiang Hai and the others went downstairs to eat. When they arrived at the best Western restaurant, Jiang Hai, Tala, and Xia Yuan sat down and casually ordered some seafood. Jiang Hai and the others began to eat. No one came to find trouble with Jiang Hai. It seemed like the melodramatic story had unknowingly disappeared. After eating, the 3 of them were tired from the day's work, so they went upstairs to sleep. Originally, Jiang Hai stayed in the master bedroom. Xia Yuan and Tarak stayed in the small bedroom, but Jiang Hai just returned to his room to take off his clothes and take a shower. His room door was knocked. Jiang Hai opened the door and saw that it was none other than Xia Yuan. The public bathroom is occupied by Tarak. I wonder if I can use your bathroom to take a shower? Looking at Jiang Hai, Xia Yuan said with some hesitation. When she said that, her eyes kept drifting around. Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai smiled and directly pulled her into the room. After closing the door, he pressed her against the door and kissed her. Although Xia Yuan was shocked by Jiang Hai's actions, she did not panic. After being attacked by Jiang Hai, she took the initiative to wrap her arms around Jiang Hai's waist and began to counterattack. Unknowingly, the clothes on the 2 of them quickly disappeared. As the 2 fell on the bed, Xia Yuan looked at Jiang Hai and took a deep breath. She whispered, I just came to take a shower. I know, but we'll take a shower together later. Looking at Xia Yuan, Jiang Hai smiled and kissed her again. At the same time, his hands were not idle. After feeling that it was about time, a low moan sounded in the room. Tarak, who had just finished showering, was drying his hair while wondering where Xia Yuan had gone. It was not until she walked to Jiang Hai's room that she heard some noise. Her small face could not help but blush. Although she did not experience this, she was not a girl who did not know anything. She knew what Jiang Hai and Xia Yuan were doing inside. So after spitting, she walked back to her room to rest. Recently, she did not have a good night's sleep. Today she encountered such a situation. Not long after lying in bed, she fell asleep. On the other side, Jiang Hai and Xia Yuan's battle had reached its climax. Jiang Hai really did not expect this. This Xia Yuan was really amazing in this aspect. Perhaps it was because she had been empty for too long, but she could actually withstand Jiang Hai's attacks, and was even constantly counterattacking. The two of them fought from the bed to the ground, then to the window, then to the sofa in the room, and then to the corner of the room. After fighting for more than 2 hours, Xia Yuan let out a sigh of relief. She was satisfied with her defeat. Like an octopus, she firmly hugged Jiang Hai's body. Jiang Hai also let out a long breath. He was actually a little tired. Feeling the sweat on the two of them, Jiang Hai carried her into the bathroom. Jiang Hai, who had already prepared a vat of hot water, slowly sat down with Xia Yuan in his arms. The warm water spread over the two of them, and their fatigue gradually disappeared. Too comfortable. Perhaps the hot water gave Xia Yuan a little strength. She hugged Jiang Hai and whispered in Jiang Hai's ear. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was satisfied, but he did not know what to say. If you have time in the future, remember to come and play with me. I'm a little addicted. Seeing that Jiang Hai did not speak, Xia Yuan also smiled. She did not intend to marry Jiang Hai. She did not even want to confirm their relationship, but she was very obsessed with Jiang Hai's body. Hearing that Jiang Hai did not speak, she naturally knew what Jiang Hai meant. It was obviously a good choice to make it clear at this time. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also nodded and said seriously, "Well, of course, that's not a problem." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Xia Yuan could not help but smile. Then she continued to hug Jiang Hai, immersing herself in the impact just now. After taking a bath for half an hour, Jiang Hai carried Xia Yuan back to bed and fell asleep with her in his arms. It was a quiet night. In fact, it wasn't really a quiet night. At about 3 o'clock in the middle of the night, a group of people walked into the hospital where Izzo Adis was. Half an hour later, they pushed Izzo Adis out of the hospital. After getting into a black Ford MVP, they disappeared into the night. Less than 10 minutes later, the hospital's alarm rang loudly. Then Doyle George, who had just rested, immediately rushed to the hospital overnight with his men. When he saw the 2 state policemen who had been silently killed, and the empty room, his face was as ugly as it could be. He immediately applied for a transfer order, and then went to arrest Kristen Adis. However, when they arrived at Kristen Adis's house, they found that he had already left in the afternoon. No one knew where he went, and his casino was empty. Even his relatives did not know where he had gone. Connecting the dots, it was not difficult for Doyle George to guess that these guys should have run away. Bastard. Izzo Adis was the main culprit this time. He originally promised Jiang Hai that there would be no problems. But in the end, before the night was over, the problem occurred. Thinking of this, he could not help but look a little ferocious. He immediately issued an arrest warrant. But just as the warrant was about to be signed, it was stopped by someone. Hello. Hearing the phone ring, Jiang Hai also opened his eyes in a daze. He glanced at the time on the phone. It was only 5 o'clock, but it was Doyle George calling, so Jiang Hai picked it up. Jiang, there's a problem. Izzo Adis ran away. Hearing Jiang Hai's voice, Doyle George's tone on the phone was a little serious and helpless. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai's sleepiness was driven away a lot. Ran away? How did he run away with that kind of injury? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was very sure that Izzo Adis's hands were crippled. He could have run away with his feet. But how did he run away? Did he just stroll out like that? It should be his father, Kristen Adis. Damn it. I was going to issue an arrest warrant, but I was stopped by a veteran senator in the state. He said that this matter was still under investigation, and we shouldn't make too much of a fuss. We lost 2 agents, this fucking politician. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Doyle George couldn't help but curse. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was silent. He was not worried that this guy would harm him after he ran away. He was still very satisfied with the protective force around him. But it was not Jiang Hai's style to let the other party run away like that. After hearing his words, Jiang Hai understood what Doyle George meant. He was a person in the system, so maybe he couldn't intervene in this matter. After all, the higher-ups had given orders, and he couldn't disobey. But in fact, Jiang Hai was quite satisfied with this situation. This was because if there was any enmity, he would take revenge himself. This time, he was not very happy with the help of the police, but this time, Jiang Hai was really happy to let him run away. If he ran away, Jiang Hai would have a chance to kill these guys with his own hands. I'm leaving. Remember to visit me if you have time. The next morning after breakfast, Xia Yuan smiled at Jiang Hai again. After the two hugged, they got into a taxi and prepared to return to her home. She still had work to do today. Jiang Hai also smiled and waved his hand. After sending her to the car, he returned to his room. When he came back, Tarak woke up in a daze. Looking at her, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. You're up. Looking at Tarak, Jiang Hai said to her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Tarak also nodded obediently. She knew that this was Jiang Hai's territory, so it was better for her to pretend to be obedient. You were scared yesterday, right? You're too much. Your patriarch is old and confused, and you are also confused. Don't you know to call me when you come out? If you can't, I'll pick you up. Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai also brought up the breakfast he prepared in advance. Of course, it was ordered from the hotel. A bowl of oatmeal and a hamburger. No, that satellite phone, according to the patriarch, must be bugged. If I call you first, it may be bugged. The only people who can speak English are me and him. He has to stay in the village, so I can only come to find you. Seeing Jiang Hai bring up the food, Tarak's eyes also lit up. Without saying a word, she directly picked up the hamburger and stuffed it into her mouth. Then she ate the hamburger and drank the porridge while speaking vaguely. Slow down, no one is fighting with you. Why are you in such a hurry? What's the big deal about eavesdropping? Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai rolled his eyes at her. He had to admit that sometimes these old people are paranoid. Take Jiang Hai for example. He never cared about these things. The US government knows where he goes. Jiang Hai didn't care. This is not freedom, this is not democracy. In Jiang Hai's opinion, this is the safest way. For example, in China, no one would say no to the installation of the Sky Eye. What democracy and freedom? They think too much. There is no absolute freedom in this world. Everyone lives in a framework. At least that's what Jiang Hai thought. Therefore, he didn't care if he was being monitored, or if he was truly free. No, this time I'm bringing you something very important. No one can know about it. However, after hearing Jiang Hai's words, Tarak said with a serious face. That expression that says no one can know about it made Jiang Hai a little confused. Is it this thing? Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai took out the letter from his pocket and asked her with some doubts. Seeing her nodding seriously, Jiang Hai couldn't help but open the letter in confusion. He wanted to see what is inside that can't be seen by outsiders. After opening the envelope, Jiang Hai found two things inside. One is a piece of paper, the other is a piece of animal skin. Jiang Hai looked at the paper first. What was written on it was a letter. The letter should be from the patriarch. It said that this time the tribe survived thanks to Jiang Hai, but now he wants to trouble Jiang Hai with one thing. He is going to let Tarak go to the outside world. Among the people he knows in the outside world, the most reliable person is Jiang Hai, so he asked Jiang Hai to help take care of her and let her go to school. In order to thank Jiang Hai for his help in taking care of Tarak, he gave Jiang Hai the treasure of their tribe, a treasure map. Treasure map. Seeing this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at the animal skin. He only saw a lot of things scribbled on it. There is a red X mark in the middle. It is similar to the treasure map he saw before. Jiang Hai was a bit confused. Could it be that there really was a treasure? This treasure is real. If you know some of the history of the United States, then you should know its existence. Seeing Jiang Hai's puzzled look, Tarak couldn't help but speed up her eating. After eating the hamburger and porridge, she looked at Jiang Hai seriously and said. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was a little surprised. Does she know about this? When I came out, the patriarch was actually going to pass the position of the patriarch to me when he was old. This is also something that our tribe has been guarding for generations. You should know that the western part of the United States was built by ourselves. Looking at Jiang Hai's puzzled look, Tarak said seriously. Hearing Tarak's words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment. How is it built? The continent is drifting? Well, Jiang Hai knows that she is definitely not talking about this. So after thinking for a while, he shook his head affirmatively. Sigh. In the beginning, there were no people on the west coast of the United States. After all, most people came from Europe. They came from the east coast. The east side of the United States was Australia and Huaxia. At that time, no one in Australia had the ability to sail. And although Huaxia had the ability, your country's political policy was not to go to sea, so the west coast was empty at first. In order to develop the west coast, in the 18th and 19th centuries, the United States authorities promoted the westward movement and launched a gold rush. Seeing that Jiang Hai really didn't know, Tarak shook her head and said with a serious face. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai nodded. He still knows a little about the development of the West and the gold rush. The Chinese workers at the beginning were basically attracted by the gold rush and the construction of railroads. Many people died in the West. It can be said that the West of the United States was built on the bones of Chinese workers. There were also many survivors. If one were to talk about Chinese settlements in the United States, San Francisco would be the top choice. Even Los Angeles and New York are far worse than San Francisco. It is not an exaggeration to say that San Francisco is a Chinese city, even if it is still standing on the map of the United States. It's good to know this. In the beginning, our ancestors were also part of the West, but unlike those white people, we were slaves and were sent to develop gold mines. However, our ancestors were not satisfied, so they revolted and killed the evil slave owners. After that, they fled back to the Alabama mountains, but they left this map. According to our ancestors, the things depicted on this map are the location of the gold mine where they were enslaved. When they left, they blew up the gold mine. But in the secret chamber below the gold mine, there is still a lot of gold. Looking at Jiang Hai, Tarak said seriously. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai's eyebrows couldn't help but raise. This story is a bit interesting. Of course, what Tarak said must be to beautify his ancestors. In Jiang Hai's view, the most likely explanation is that those Native Americans were originally slaves, but when they saw the gold, they had evil thoughts, so they killed the supervisor and the boss. But with so much gold, they probably couldn't take it away, so they deliberately dug a basement, hid the gold, and then blew up the mine, waiting for time to come back and take it out. However, they did not expect that they might have stirred up a hornet's nest. They were chased from the west coast to the east coast, all the way until they hid in the Alabama mountain range. However, these people were scared out of their wits and did not come out for the rest of their lives. Later, they made up a story and left behind a map. But no matter what the reason is, Jiang Hai is most concerned about the thing inside, which is gold. Moreover, there was more than 1 million gold buried in the ground. Whether it was sold at the price of gold or at the price of antiques, it was estimated that it would be a great fortune. In his opinion, Du Feynman should be very interested in it. Last time when those people attacked the tribe, it was also because of this thing. Suddenly, Jiang Hai understood what the patriarch was afraid of. If the outside world knew that they have such a treasure map, whether it is the American government or those rich people, they will not let them go. Instead of hiding it, it is better to use it to get on good terms with Jiang Hai. Although the time they spent together was not long, he can see that Jiang Hai is a very particular person. If Jiang Hai gets these treasures, although it is impossible for him to give them all, the benefits of their tribe will not be small. And even if Jiang Hai forgot, he specially sent Tarak to Jiang Hai's side. If Tarak and Jiang Hai have any special relationship in the future, then with Jiang Hai's way of doing things, he will not treat her lightly. Tarak also said that she will learn according to the treatment of the future patriarch, which means that she will return to the tribe in the future. If Jiang Hai does not want Tarak to return to the tribe, then it is inevitable that he will take the entire Toga tribe out. Even if he follows Tarak's idea and lets her go back, with Jiang Hai's way of doing things, he will definitely not treat his woman badly. At that time, the Tarak tribe will be truly glorious, and it will be more useful than holding a treasure map. He has to admit that the patriarch made the right bet. Jiang Hai is indeed not a ruthless person. Not to mention that he and Tarak do not have that kind of relationship, just based on the treasure map that they gave him. If the treasure is real, he will definitely not let the Toga tribe be like it is now. As expected of an old man who doesn't die to be a thief. This old man is really good at reading people. Holding this treasure map, Jiang Hai admitted that he is very interested. Now let's see if this thing is real. I'm full. What are we going to do now? Go back to your house. While Jiang Hai was meditating, Tarak had also finished eating. He put the bowl on the table and blinked his big eyes at Jiang Hai. Chapter 775. No, since we're here, let's walk around here first. Since you want to live with us, you must buy some clothes and so on. Since we're here, let's just take a look. By the way, I have to go to my company. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment and said to her, since they are here, he is going to walk around Boston. Besides, he has other things to do. First, he has to send someone to see if the gold mine is still there. Second, he has to find Izoatis. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Tarak naturally had no objection. In fact, she felt that her clothes were quite good. It was pure animal skin. It was breathable and comfortable to wear. But the patriarch said that after coming here, she had to listen to Jiang Hai's arrangements, so she would not resist. Let's go. Seeing that she did not object, Jiang Hai also stood up, washed his face, and then looked again. After making sure that he did not leave anything behind, he went to the first floor to check out. Then the two took a taxi to Newbury Street. Newbury Street was also a shopping mecca in Boston, similar to the shopping streets in every city. Newbury Street was very eye-catching in Boston, and even in the United States. It was also known as Boston's Rodeo Avenue. It was called a street, but it was actually a block because it covered a total of 8 blocks. There were hundreds of popular shops, gourmet restaurants, and many beauty salons. The shops on both sides of the street were the most popular red brick buildings in the 19th century. They looked very elegant. Even the unique half-basement shops of that era were open for business. If you didn't look carefully, you would think you were in Europe. Of course, for Jiang Hai, he couldn't see the difference between the United States and Europe. Bitches twisted love. But there was also a point to pay attention to when shopping here. The level of the shops in the east was aristocratic, and the further west it was, the more commoner. So if you want to buy something, if it was some luxury goods, go to the east. If it was some ordinary brands, go to the west. Tarak herself didn't know much about money. Jiang Hai didn't care about money, so he went directly to the east and let Tarak look around. She liked Dior, so Jiang Hai and the others went in to buy it. Soon, when Tarak came out again, the animal skin and hiking shoes on her body changed into a set of Dior women's summer clothes this year. However, it wasn't the kind of summer dress that one would wear in high heels. Tarak had never worn high heels in his life, so it was better not to force her. She was dressed very young and beautiful, but she was wearing a pair of flat shoes. She specifically asked the shop assistant to buy them from Converse. After changing into the new clothes, Jiang Hai also bought her a few more sets of clothes. She walked out with Jiang Hai with a big smile on her face. She was a little hungry, so she decided to have lunch nearby. After lunch, Jiang Hai took her to the Tunglong Company's location in Boston. After arriving downstairs, he took Tarak directly to the Tunglong Company's floor. As soon as they walked down, a girl at the front desk stood up respectfully and nodded gently without looking at them. Welcome to the Tunglong Company. How can I help you? Hearing this person's voice, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment. Then after the person raised her head, he was stunned. The girl opposite him was also stunned, because Jiang Hai knew this girl, and the girl also knew Jiang Hai. You are Kelly's classmate, you are? Looking at the girl, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl smiled and then said confidently to Jiang Hai, well, it's me, my name is Jenny Pond. You have changed a lot. But why are you at the front desk? I think it's not too much to give a talent like you a project manager. Looking at Jenny Pond in front of him, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. In his impression, Jenny Pond was not bad looking, but the way she dressed should be completely different. She had very long straight hair, covered her face, lowered her head when she walked, and wore a pair of very old-fashioned glasses. Although she was very clean, she gave people a feeling of dispiritedness and shabbiness. But at this time, Jenny Pond was completely different. She had refreshing straight hair, but there were some curls in the hair. Her face was painted with lighter makeup that was different from the mainstream in the United States. She was wearing an office lady's suit, which made people's eyes light up. If it weren't for Jiang Hai's good memory, there would be very few people who would recognize this girl and the girl from before. But what made Jiang Hai even more surprised was that he remembered that this girl was quite capable. Why was she at the front desk? Was Zheng Jin purposely giving the cold shoulder to the person he had recommended? If that was the case, then there was a problem. Hehe. Director Zheng also joined in the same way. But you also know that my personality is very bad. If I continue to be like this, it will be difficult for me to gain a foothold in this world. So, Director Zheng specially transferred me to the front desk for 3 months, so that I can change my previous temper. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Jenny Pond smiled. She was actually very satisfied with Zheng Jin's arrangement. These days at the front desk, she had learned a lot: how to unite colleagues, how to receive guests, and how to speak to whoever she met. Of course, she also saw the mess in society, but she was called by Jiang Hai, and she was protected by Zheng Jin. Even if she was good-looking, no one dared to provoke her. Otherwise, Zheng Jin was not to be trifled with. Are you here to find Director Zheng this time? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also nodded with satisfaction. It was good that she was not deliberately targeting him. Seeing Jiang Hai's relieved expression, Jenny Pond also smiled, and then asked Jiang Hai with some doubts. No, I'm here to look for Valentina and Arlsala. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai shook his head naturally, and then said to her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Jenny Pond immediately responded, and led him to Jiang Hai's chairman's office, and then went to find Valentina and Aleppo. Speaking of these two women, no, not only the two of them, but also Belyak Trotsky and Raylis Carter. These 4 women were now quite famous in the company. Raylis Carter, the Samoan girl, was now the security captain of the Soaring Dragon group in this office building. In the beginning, those security guards still had some contempt for such a delicate and short girl. However, after Raylis Carter beat them up so badly that they didn't dare to get up again within a minute, no one dared to say anything. Belyak Trotsky was Zheng Jin's bodyguard. On the surface, he was an assistant, but in fact he was a bodyguard who followed her in and out. Valentina Baralikia and Alessera were the leaders of the 2 special foreign trade groups. They didn't need to talk about work. They were more there to hold down the fort. Originally, because the Tunglong Company was a newly established company, including the logistics and the airport, they were very disdainful of the Tunglong Company, and sometimes they would deliberately hold back the goods. Of course, they didn't dare to exceed the time limit, because they knew that the chief lawyer of the Tunglong Company was Moses Adams. If they dared to hold back the goods, they would be sued until they went bankrupt. But even if they didn't hold back the goods, they would try to hold back as much as possible. For example, the new fish and shrimp that arrived today, the departure time was between 7 a.m. and 10 a.m. Originally, the goods could be delivered at 8 a.m., but these people held back until 9:50 a.m., which was annoying. But after these 2 came, it was said that in less than 3 days, these guys were well behaved. The goods of the Soaring Dragon group were always the first to be delivered. They would be delivered when the time arrived. They were much more famous than Jiang Hai. After Jenny Pond passed the message, Valentina and Aleppo came in less than 5 minutes. As soon as they came to Jiang Hai's office, they rushed to Jiang Hai's side with a smile, and sat on the armrests of Jiang Hai's chair. One on the left and one on the right. You came to see us. Didn't we just meet last Sunday? Looking at Jiang Hai, the 2 women were quite enthusiastic. To be honest, now they really had Jiang Hai's shadow in their hearts. Jiang Hai was not only their buyer, but also their master. Moreover, he allowed them to walk under the sun. Most importantly, he had a certain amount of power. Just thinking about it made them feel good. In the past, no matter how outstanding they were, They still had to be careful when facing some of the elites of society, high officials, and so on, because they were the potential customers of their organization. But with Jiang Hai, they didn't need to be careful. Although they didn't go to the extent of being the boss, they also didn't need to act like a grandson whenever they met anyone. Jiang Hai really did what he had promised them. He allowed them to live under the sun, as if they were one person. Therefore, in fact, although Galena and the others were usually cold, they were still very lively with Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai's Soaring Dragon group had 2 days off every week. Basically, every Friday, these girls would go back to Jiang Hai's manor. The only one who couldn't go back was Du Ning, because she had to protect Qili. As for Biliak, she could also go back every half a month, because Raylis Carter would replace her for a week. They had just met a few days ago, but now that they saw Jiang Hai, they were still very excited and happy. I came here this time, first, to see you, and second, because there are 2 things I need you to investigate. Hugging the 2 girls' waists, Jiang Hai smiled. He could feel their attachment to him, which was a very good thing, but he still had to talk about business. Chapter 776. Today there are 2 things I need you to do. One is to help me find a group of people, Izo Adis and Kristen Adis. These 2 guys ambushed me, and after they were dealt with, they were rescued by others. But I don't think they have left the United States yet, so I will leave this matter to you. After Jialina left, she had already told these people about what happened yesterday. The purpose was to strengthen the security of the defense. However, they did not know that Izo Adis had been rescued by someone else this morning. This was a very important matter. After offending Jiang Hai, they still want to live normally? They are really too naive. Even if they chase them to the ends of the earth, they will still deal with these guys, because they are also a potential threat. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, the eyes of the 2 women became fierce. Although they were still smiling, even Tarak felt a faint killing intent. It seems that these 2 women are not easy to provoke. Second, help me check this place. After Jiang Hai finished speaking, he took out the map he got from Tarak. After taking a look at the map, Sarah immediately took out a piece of paper. She didn't want to draw the map. If she wanted to draw it, she could just copy it, or take a picture with her mobile phone. How simple would that be? What she was doing now was to use a code that only they could understand to record the map. Jiang Hai glanced at the map, and saw that it was really messy. There were English words, numbers, and some words that were obviously in Arabic or Hebrew. It was very difficult to record. Anyway, Jiang Hai gave up after a glance. Wanting to understand this piece of paper was not an easy thing to do. About 10 minutes later, Sarah also finished recording, and then put this piece of paper in the inner pocket of her clothes. Seeing that they were all done, Jiang Hai also smiled, and put away the original animal skin. Originally, since Jiang Hai came, he wanted to go out with Sarah and Valentina in the afternoon to play. But after the 2 got the task, they left first. For them, it was a very happy thing to have a task to do, so Jiang Hai didn't stop them. Then, he went to see Release Card Store in Biliak, who had to protect Xingjin. After that, Jiang Hai was ready to go back. Of course, when he saw Biliak, Jiang Hai also saw Xingjin. But Xingjin didn't have a good impression of Jiang Hai, especially when she saw a girl beside him. Speaking of which, Xingjin was still quite loyal to Qijia. Jiang Hai had a lot of girls on his side, so she naturally felt uncomfortable. So, after saying goodbye to Jiang Hai, she went to do her own things. Although she didn't like Jiang Hai, she was still very concerned about the company's affairs. After saying goodbye to Biliak and the Violator, Release, Jiang Hai also left. When he left, he naturally bumped into Jenny Pound. According to her, she wanted to treat Jiang Hai to a meal to express her gratitude. This was also what she heard from the people in the company. This was a way for people in China to express their gratitude. But Jiang Hai didn't lack that meal. After telling her to work hard and thank him, Jiang Hai also left. He went downstairs directly, found a taxi, and prepared to go directly back to Winthrop. While Jiang Hai was taking the taxi to Winthrop, a group of people were slowly moving in the direction of New York. There were a total of 8 people in this group. 6 of them were strong men, and 2 of them, one was in a wheelchair, and the other looked haggard. This group of people was none other than Kristen Adis and the others. Seeing his son's miserable appearance yesterday, Kristen Adis was really angry. He really wanted to fight Jiang Hai, but considering that he probably couldn't win against Jiang Hai, he had to swallow his anger. There was only hope when people were alive. He only had one son, Izzo Adis. He must protect the bloodline of his family. Therefore, he used all his ability and connections to find these 6 most loyal subordinates of his in the past. He took over the hospital and saved his son. However, after saving his son, it was only the beginning because they still had to escape. They didn't dare to drive or walk near the road. Because if they killed a police officer, even if the police didn't issue a national arrest warrant, the police in Massachusetts would definitely not let them go. So they could only walk on some small roads and move toward New York. Before leaving, Kristen Adis had already prepared. They were going to New York, where he knew someone in the underworld. Using that person's ability, they would first make a few fake identities, then use these identities to go to New Jersey, where they would take a plane to Panama. He just didn't know if his plan would be completed. Not far away on the highway, from time to time, there were sounds of police cars whistling by. They had not rested at all since 3 o'clock in the morning, nor had they eaten anything. They were almost out of water. Although everyone felt very tired, and hungry, they knew very well that now was not the time to rest. At the very least, they had to leave Massachusetts before they could rest. Therefore, they had been hurrying along. But they didn't notice that a motorcycle, unknowingly, had left Boston and was slowly chasing them in the direction they escaped. But according to the speed of the motorcycle, it would take a while for it to catch up. At this time, Jiang Hai and Tarak had returned to their home in Winthrop. After paying the taxi, Jiang Hai walked back to the villa with Tarak. It was the first time he came to Jiang Hai's home, so Tarak was a little nervous and scared. When he walked, he was very careful, as if he was afraid of any noise, but this was just deceiving himself. Before he walked to the front of the villa, 2 dogs suddenly barked in front of him, and then 2 big dogs quickly ran out of the villa and rushed to Jiang Hai, wagging their tails vigorously. "Hey, these dogs are so big." Looking at the 2 big dogs, Tarak was not afraid, but he was very excited, and he couldn't help but say. The Toga tribe also raised dogs, and they had a lot of dogs. But these dogs were basically some native dogs, and their bloodlines were very messy. They were not big, and they were not fierce, but they were very strong because these dogs had to cooperate with the people in the tribe to hunt. In Tarak's opinion, if Little Huang and Xiaobai were used to hunt, they would be very good dogs. This size looked very intimidating. Yeah, they only know how to eat. Come, let me introduce you. This is Little Huang, this is Xiaobai, and this is Tarak. They will be living here in the future, so let's get to know each other. Hearing Tarak's words, Jiang Hai also smiled and patted the heads of the 2 dogs and said to them, "Although Little Huang and Xiaobai can't speak, it may be because they absorbed a lot of aura. The IQ of these 2 guys is actually very high, almost the IQ of a 6 or 7-year-old child. According to the domestic standard, this is already the level of a first grader, so they can understand the words of people very well." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, they took the initiative to go over and sniff Taraga's scent. Then Xiaobai grinned and wagged its tail. It is a Caucasian dog, and Little Huang, the green wolf mastiff, just turned around indifferently and squatted down. This is considered to be getting to know Taraga. Good dog, good dog. Looking at Xiaobai's friendly action, Taraga was also very happy. She rubbed Xiaobai's head hard and said with a smile. Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai was relieved. It seems that her life here will not be too boring. Even if she can't play with the women at home, she has her own playmates. After watching her play with Xiaobai for a while, Jiang Hai also took her to the villa. Walking into the villa, Qijia and the others were all there. Yesterday, Jiang Hai called and explained that Taraga would come. When Jialina came back, she also roughly told them what Jiang Hai did. Of course, in front of them, she couldn't tell them that Jiang Hai went to shoot. She said that Taraga went out of the forest, then called Jiang Hai and asked Jiang Hai to pick her up. Of course, there were many loopholes. But Chi Jia and the others also understood that if she didn't tell them, they wouldn't be able to get anything out of it. However, for Jiang Hai to bring another girl home, these girls were a little uncomfortable in their hearts. So after Jiang Hai entered the door, they were still very warm to Taraga, but their faces were a little cold to Jiang Hai. Facing their attitude, Jiang Hai just smiled and said nothing. Then everyone took Taraga to the second floor and tidied up her room. Then Delina and Marian, who were about the same age as her, took her around. They didn't have that kind of relationship with Jiang Hai. Now that they had a new playmate, it was a good thing for them. Seeing that these girls could play together, Jiang Hai was also very happy. The most important thing in a family was harmony, whether these things were acting in front of him or not. At least Jiang Hai himself liked this feeling. Sitting on his big sofa, Jiang Hai's eyes narrowed. In fact, he had always been a lazy person. If life could go on like this, it would be a good choice. As the sky gradually darkened, a heavy rain slowly floated down. However, at this time, there was a group of people whose mood was completely opposite to Jiang Hai's. As the sky gradually darkened, a glimmer of hope appeared in these people's eyes. But suddenly, the sound of a motorcycle came, making these people's faces instantly become ugly. Chapter 777. Be careful. Hearing the sound of the motorcycle approaching, Kristen Adis couldn't help but say to the people around him. At the same time he glanced around. At this time, they were about to leave the territory of Massachusetts. At this time, there was a river and a highway in front of them. As long as they cross this river or the highway, they will enter the territory of New York. When they get there, they can relax a little. At least, the Massachusetts police will not easily trouble them. But this is also the most dangerous time. Hearing his words, the faces of the people around him changed. Then they nodded seriously and took out their guns from behind. Their eyes were also scanning around, ready to see where the enemy was. At this time, the dark clouds that had been accumulating in the sky seemed to be about to erupt. Bean-sized raindrops fell from the sky, constantly drenching these people and the surrounding land. At this moment, the sound of the motorcycle suddenly grew louder. Then a figure flashed in the dark night. The figure was so fast that it didn't even give these people any chance to react. They only saw the person on the figure take out 2 pistols in an instant. Bang! 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 2 of these people had already fallen in a pool of blood, and these people immediately opened fire at this time. But the speed of the motorcycle was much faster than they imagined. After landing, it disappeared into the distance in an instant. These people's bullets all hit the ground. Seeing this scene, Kristen Adis's eyes couldn't help but dim. He knew that this person was definitely not from the police, so it could only be Jiang Hai's people. If they don't kill this person, then they will have to die. Form a circle. This guy is not from the police. It's useless even if we cross the river. Kristen Adis was still very clear that Jiang Hai's people won't care. The place where they killed him was in Massachusetts or New York. There should be some trouble. But if these fugitives died, even if they knew that Jiang Hai did it, no one would seek justice for them. What's more, they couldn't represent justice themselves. In such a case, they could only fight with their backs against the wall. Hearing his words, the remaining 4 people instantly surrounded them and looked around vigilantly. But at this moment, the sound of a motorcycle could be heard again, and the motorcycle came out again. However, the speed of the car was too fast. The man held a gun in one hand and fired 3 or 4 shots in an instant. This time it was even worse. 3 of the 4 people on the opposite side fell down. The remaining one fired his pistol wildly. But unfortunately, the pistol had a limit of bullets. With 2 clicking sounds, the empty sound of the firing pin told him that there were no more bullets. At this moment, the motorcycle that was about to escape suddenly skidded to a stop. Under their gaze, a woman in a black leather jacket stood on the spot, looked at them, and took off her helmet. In an instant, under the afterglow of the sun, a pretty face appeared in the eyes of the 3 men. Seeing this pretty face, the 3 men were stunned for a moment. They found it hard to imagine how such a pretty woman could be so ferocious. She killed 5 of their brothers without blinking, but fortunately, their reaction was very fast. The man who was still alive picked up his companion's pistol and was about to attack. But at this time, the woman also made her move. She raised her gun and shot the man between his eyebrows. If someone saw at this time, they would find that the woman had shot the man between his eyebrows. This was also the reason why she was not worried that these people would get up again. 6 people, each with a bloody hole in their heads, were naturally dead. Among the people who were still standing, only this woman, Kristen Atis and Izzo Atis, who was sitting in a wheelchair and had been scared out of his wits. This woman's skills had really left a deep impression on him. He had never thought that a person could take care of those seemingly well-made people so easily. It seems that I can't escape this time. Looking at the woman who stopped the motorcycle and walked closer and closer, Kristen Atis smiled bitterly and hugged his son's head. The father and son touched each other's heads, and Kristen looked at Izzo. The rain in the sky did not dim the light in the father's eyes. Remember, as long as there are leaves flying, the fire will burn. The shadow of the fire shines on hope, and new leaves will sprout. I'm sorry. I can't watch my only son get married and have children. But you must live. Remember, you must live. Kristen Atis looked at his son and said with a smile. His big hand also stroked Izzo Atis's face. Now that they had come this far, was there any need to talk about hatred? It should be. But if he had the chance to do it again, he would still do it. If he could go back in time, then he would have stayed far away from Jianghai. A father is willing to do anything for his child, even if it means sacrificing his own life. Dad, you. Hearing his father's words, Izzo was a little scared at this time. He had a feeling in his heart that he seemed to know what his father was going to do. Looking at Izzo's appearance, Kristen Atis chuckled. Then in an instant, he pushed his son's wheelchair into the distant river. He shouted and directly bumped into the woman who was coming over. Seeing his movements, the woman did not immediately react. She raised her hand and fired several shots. But she didn't know if this guy was really lucky, or the rain hindered her performance. The bullets flew past Izzo's body, and the only one that hit him was his leg. Just as she was about to aim and shoot again, Kristen Atis rushed over and pounced on her without saying a word. Seeing this, the woman's eyes narrowed, and she instantly withdrew her gun. At the same time, she pulled out a finger blade from her boot. She didn't give Kristen Atis any chance at all. The finger blade instantly pierced into the back of his head, and his body stiffened. As the finger blade was pulled out, Kristen Atis fell to the ground powerlessly. When the woman was about to chase Izzo Atis, she found that Izzo Atis had fallen into the river. She immediately rushed to the river, but only saw his wheelchair. As for Izzo Atis, he had disappeared. Seeing this, her eyes narrowed, and she couldn't help but curse herself. What the hell is going on? She immediately walked a few steps to the river, but only saw his wheelchair. As for Izzo Atis, he had disappeared. Seeing this, her eyes narrowed, and she couldn't help but curse herself. Hello Jianghai, the mission failed. Izzo Atis escaped. Then she helplessly pressed her Bluetooth headset. On the other side, Jianghai's cell phone in Winthrop also rang at this time. Picking up the phone, the woman on the other side, to be exact, Valentina, said with some depression. This is the first time she has performed such a mission in Jianghai. Oh, what about the others? Hearing Valentina's words, Jianghai couldn't help but ask with some doubts. The others have been dealt with. Hearing Jianghai's words, Valentina said immediately. Oh, it's okay. The most important thing is that you are not injured. That guy, if there is a chance in the future, I will deal with him. After you deal with him, you can go back. It's already very late. Hearing Valentina's words, Jianghai said in a flat tone. The heavy rain will cover all traces. They are the most professional, so they know how to take advantage of this. Not long after she disappeared, in the turbulent river, an unconscious figure appeared on the surface of the river. Following the current, he rushed forward. After an unknown amount of time, he stopped on a shoal. His condition didn't look too good. At this moment, a small group of figures that looked rather pathetic walked out of the forest in the distance. These people were fully armed, and the person in the lead had a large patch on his face, as if he had encountered a fire. Beside him was a person wearing mountaineering clothes. The heavy rain continued to fall. With the sound of a horn, the shutter door outside the garage of a small villa in downtown Boston slowly opened, and then Valentina and her motorcycle slowly drove into the garage. At this time, in addition to this motorcycle, there were 3 other cars, a Porsche Boxster, a Lotus Elise, and a Volvo C70. They were all sports cars, but although they were sports cars, they were actually not expensive. The Porsche Boxster, the best GTS version in China, was sold for about $1,150,000. It was even cheaper in the United States, less than $80,000. The Lotus Elise was about $700,000 and was sold for more than $60,000 here. The Volvo C70, which was not sold in China, had a guide price of $600,000 and was sold for more than $60,000 here. Therefore, it was still very good to buy a car abroad. At least in terms of price, there was a lot of flexibility. The owners of these 3 cars were Alfred Sala, Belyak Trotsky, and Raylis Carter. Valentina's motorcycle was not to be underestimated. The price of this motorcycle was not much cheaper than these cars. This motorcycle was a BMW HP4, which sold for more than $300,000 in China and was sold for nearly $50,000 here. Chapter 778. You got drenched. Who told you not to buy a car? Looking at Valentina, who was drenched all over, Alcera said with a smile. Both of them used to be alpha wolves and now led a group. Valentina and Alcera were both competitors and friends. Belyak used to be a wolf, while Lizzie was not even a wolf, but a tarantula. Therefore, in terms of rank, they were not on the same level as Valentina and Alcera. Although they were treated the same in Jiang Hai's place, they dared not show off when Jiang Hai was not there. Usually, if Valentina and Alcera did not ask them, they would not dare to joke around. Your car is too slow. When Jiang Hai and the others went out to perform tasks, in addition to their weekly salary, they also received a salary from the group. In addition to this, the rental money belonged to Jiang Hai, and each of them had $150,000. This money was used to buy equipment, guns, and cars. The rest was their own. When they went out to carry out missions, the organization would also give them money, but the things they bought had to be returned to the organization after the mission. However, they still had their vision. They were very clear about what was good and what was suitable for them, so everything was well prepared. For example, the motorcycle that Valentina was riding now was quite famous. At present, the fastest motorcycle in the world should be the Dodge Tomahawk, but this kind of motorcycle was not allowed to be on the road. If it was on the road, the police would arrest it. It was the same in the United States. Such a motorcycle was not allowed to be on the road. In addition to this car, there were only 2 top motorcycles. One was the Falcon, and the other was the HP4. But everyone in the manor knew that Jiang Hai was different from Japan. The Falcon was a motorcycle of Suzuki, so she bought the HP4. It should be known that this motorcycle was much faster than a Bugatti Veyron in terms of acceleration. Yes, compared to a super sports car, this motorcycle was not much slower. Generally, domestic sports cars with a price of less than 1 million, or even 10 million, were not as fast as this motorcycle. The only thing that was definitely faster than this motorcycle was an F1, but it was not on the road. Hearing Valentina's words, Alcera curled her lips, then threw a bath towel over to her. At this time, Valentina had already taken off the leather jacket outside. This leather jacket was indeed very powerful. It was specially customized. This leather jacket had 3 functions. First, it was bulletproof. Second, it was waterproof. And third, it could block heat and infrared rays, so that people would not discover her existence. In fact, everyone had such a leather jacket, but some were leather jackets and some were other clothes. After taking off the leather jacket, Valentina didn't care about these things. She took off her vest and underwear, then took the bath towel. While drying her hair, she walked upstairs. The leather jacket was hung up, and the vest and underwear were directly put into the washing machine. Then she sat on the sofa in the living room and watched TV. Al, Sarah, and the others also followed behind her. Looking at Valentina's appearance, Al, Sarah thought for a moment and sat down. This time, the task was not completed. Have you thought about what to do next? Looking at Valentina, Al, Sarah thought for a moment and asked her. Hearing her words, Valentina couldn't help but sigh and put down her feet that were originally on the coffee table. When the rain stops, I'll search along the shore. This is a stain on my record. I failed my first mission. Although Jiang Hai didn't blame me, why do I feel so uncomfortable in my heart? Hearing Al's words, Wagner said with some annoyance. To be honest, this was the first time that she didn't complete a mission, causing her to feel so uneasy. In the past, she would be very worried if she couldn't complete a mission. She was worried that the organization would punish her. However, ever since she became an alpha wolf, she no longer had to worry about these problems. This was because her identity allowed her to accept missions that she couldn't complete. But this task was so simple, so easy, and it was given by Jiang Hai, the most important person in her heart, but she didn't complete it. To be honest, her heart was a little flustered, not because of fear, but because of guilt. I hope your luck is good. Shrugging her shoulders, Sarah looked at Valentina and said. She couldn't comment on this matter. But even if Jiang Hai doesn't say anything, don't forget that there are two more powerful existences in Jiang Hai's family. Whether it was Galena or Azalina, both of them were much stronger than them. They were unwilling to lose just like that. As Sarah's voice fell, the living room became quiet. Only the sound of the TV kept echoing. At this moment, a pizza advertisement was broadcast on the TV, which made the girls raise their eyebrows. Do you want to eat pizza? Looking at the others, Lizzie asked them. That's a good idea. Hearing her words, the other three people's eyes lit up and said with a smile. Hearing her words, everyone picked up their mobile phones and ordered takeout. As for the task, wait until the rain stops. The rain in summer is like this. It comes quickly and goes quickly, especially in a coastal province like Massachusetts. After almost 2 hours of heavy rain, after the night was completely dark, the rain slowly subsided, and then the dark clouds in the sky gradually dispersed. As a bright moon shone in the sky, everyone also fell asleep. At this moment, in an abandoned cottage on the outskirts of Connecticut, a group of people were warming themselves over a bonfire. There were some rabbits and fishes on the bonfire. On the other side of the bonfire, there was an unconscious person. Connecticut is located next to Massachusetts and New York. It is bordered by Massachusetts to the north, New York to the west, Rhode Island to the east, and the sea to the south. It faces Long Island in New York. This state is most famous for two things. One is Yale University, and the other is the famous rich state in the United States. In 2005, it was ranked as the state with the highest per capita income in the United States. And that was an undeserved reputation. Such a high-income state is destined to have land worth a lot of money, and there are fewer people who will be farmers and ranchers. Therefore, in the area of Jianshu, to be honest, there are not many people, and it looks a bit desolate. The weather after the rain is a little cold, and this unconscious person is covered in water. As the cold wind blows, he can't help but shiver. He suddenly woke up and looked around in horror. As soon as he moved, the people on the other side also noticed him. Then two people came over and squatted in front of him. Who are you? Where is this? Looking at the people in front of him, Audis said with a horrified face. Because the person in front of him, at this time, is really terrifying. His face is smeared with various colors of oil paint, and he looks very embarrassed. His clothes are scraped, but he looks extremely fierce. He has a gun on his back and a gun on his waist. When he squats down, he can see the bandages wrapped around his palms. At first glance, he seems to have struggled from the line of life and death. It would be strange if he is not fierce. Now is not the time for you to ask me, but the time for us to ask you. Boy, who are you? Why did you appear by the river? Looking at you dressed like this, you should have money. We saved you. Are you not going to give us a reward? Looking at Audis in front of him, The man smiled disdainfully, and then said word by word. Hearing his words, Izoatis couldn't help but be a little confused. My name is Izoatis. I don't have much money now. As for why I fell into the river, it was because I was pushed down by someone. But as long as you take me to New York, I think I will give you some reward. After all, he has seen the world before. Although Izoatis is scared, he did not panic. Instead, he said calmly, "Tell me, what is your name?" Hearing his words, the people here did not respond, but a man in a mountaineering suit sitting next to the fire shouted, then walked quickly to Izoatis and asked him with shining eyes. I said, "My name is Izoatis. Do you know me?" Looking at the middle-aged man in front of him, Izzo thought about it carefully. It seems that he doesn't know him, but why does he know me? I know Chelsea's Kristen Atis. What is your relationship with him? Looking at Izoatis, the middle-aged man smiled and tried to be as polite as possible, then said to him, "Kristen Atis is my father." Hearing that he knows his father, and then thinking of his father, Izoatis could not help but lower his head. He still remembers the picture of his father's last moment in his mind. Kristen is your father? Then why are you here? I remember that Kristen's power in Boston is not small. Looking at him, the middle-aged man in front of him said with some doubts, "It's all because of Jiang Hai. My father has been killed by him." Speaking of this, Izzo's eyes were full of deep hatred. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.